The call came at 2:47 a.m. 3 words shattered Dante Salvatore's world. She's been shot. Elena Romano, the pediatric nurse with kind eyes who'd saved his nephew's life, the woman he'd watched from the shadows for months, too afraid his darkness would consume her light, was dying. Someone had put a bullet in her chest. Someone had dared to touch what was his. In that moment, the most feared mafia boss in the city made a promise written in blood and fury. Whoever did this would beg for death long before he granted it. If you're watching from around the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stay until the end because what happens next will leave you breathless. The penthouse office overlooked the glittering skyline of the city, a kingdom of steel and shadow that bent to one man's will. Dante Salvatore stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a crystal glass of bourbon in his hand, watching the lights below like a god surveying his domain. At 34, he'd built an empire on fear, loyalty, and the kind of ruthless precision that turned enemies into cautionary tales. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Marco Vitelli, his second-in-command, sat across the mahogany desk, reviewing shipping manifests that had nothing to do with the legitimate import business printed on the letterhead. "The senator's getting greedy," Marco said, his scarred face twisted in disgust. "Wants a bigger cut from the waterfront deal. Politicians always do." Dante's voice carried the smooth danger of a blade sliding from its sheath. "Remind him what happened to the last public servant who forgot his place." The phone buzzed again. Then again. Dante's jaw tightened. Only 5 people had this number, and 4 of them knew better than to call at this hour, unless... The phone erupted in a shrill ring that seemed to crack through the room's calculated calm. He glanced at the screen. St. Mary's Hospital. His blood turned to ice. "Salvatore," he answered, his tone deadly quiet. "Mr. Salvatore?" A woman's voice, professional but strained. "This is Dr. Jennifer Hayes from St. Mary's Emergency Department. You're listed as an emergency contact for Elena Romano." The glass slipped from his fingers, bourbon splashing across Italian marble. "What happened?" "Not a question. A command." "She's been admitted with a gunshot wound to the chest. She's in surgery now, but..." "Mr. Salvatore, you need to come immediately. Her condition is critical." The world tilted. Dante's knuckles whitened around the phone. "I'm on my way." He ended the call and was moving before the phone left his ear, his mind a whirlwind of cold fury and something far more dangerous, fear, raw, clawing fear he hadn't felt since he was 8 years old, watching his father bleed out on their kitchen floor. "Boss?" Marco was on his feet, reading the murder in Dante's eyes. "Get the car. Now!" Dante shrugged into his suit jacket, his movements sharp and controlled even as chaos raged beneath his skin. "Call Dr. Petrov. Tell him to get to St. Mary's with a full surgical team. I don't care who he has to wake up." "What's happened?" "Someone touched what's mine." The words came out like a death sentence. "And they're going to wish they'd never been born." The drive to St. Mary's took 12 minutes. Dante spent every second of it making calls, his voice a whip crack of authority that mobilized his entire organization. By the time his black SUV screeched to a halt outside the emergency entrance, he had 20 men positioned around the hospital perimeter, and another team pulling security footage from every camera in a 10-block radius. He stormed through the automatic doors like an avenging angel, Marco and 2 bodyguards flanking him. The fluorescent light seemed obscene, too bright and sterile for the violence churning in his chest. A security guard moved to intercept them. One look at Dante's face sent him scrambling backward. "Elena Romano," Dante bit out to the nurse at the desk. "Where?" The middle-aged woman's eyes widened at the barely leashed violence radiating from him. "Sir, Or 3, another nurse interrupted, appearing at the desk with a tablet. She was younger, and recognition flickered in her eyes. Everyone in this hospital knew who Dante Salvatore was. His donations had funded the new pediatric wing. "Dr. Hayes is expecting you. 4th floor, surgical suite." Dante was moving before she finished speaking. The elevator was too slow, so he took the stairs, his expensive shoes echoing off concrete like gunshots. Marco struggled to keep pace. "Boss, slow down. Did I ask for your input?" Dante's voice could have cut glass. He burst through the stairwell door onto the fourth floor and immediately spotted Dr. Hayes, a petite woman in her 40s with steel gray hair and steady hands. She stood outside OR3, stripping off bloodied surgical gloves. Elena's blood. Mr. Salvatore. Dr. Hayes met his gaze without flinching, which earned her a fraction of his respect. She's stable for now, but the next few hours are critical. The bullet entered below her left clavicle, missed her heart by centimeters, but caused significant damage to who shot her? Not how. Not why. Who? The police are investigating. All I know is she was found in the parking garage beneath her apartment building. A neighbor heard the shot and called 911. Dante's hands curled into fists. I need to see her. She's unconscious and will be for several more hours. The best thing you can do right now is, I wasn't asking for permission, doctor. Something flickered across Dr. Hayes's face. Understanding, perhaps, or resignation. 5 minutes. And don't touch anything. The operating room was a sterile battlefield of machines and monitors, their rhythmic beeping the only sound besides Dante's harsh breathing. And there, small and impossibly fragile on the table, was Elena. Her chestnut hair was matted with sweat, her olive skin pale as death. A breathing tube snaked between lips that had smiled at his nephew with such gentle warmth 6 months ago. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that kept her tethered to life. Dante had seen death 1,000 times, had caused it with his own hands. But the sight of Elena lying there, broken and bleeding, carved something vital out of his chest. Boss? Marco's voice was soft behind him. Dr. Petrov is here. He's reviewing her chart with the surgical team. Dante couldn't look away from her face. Tell him whatever she needs. The best equipment, the best medications. I don't care what it costs. Already done. A nurse entered, checking the monitors with practiced efficiency. She glanced at Dante nervously. Sir, I'm sorry, but you really need to. How long has she worked here? The question surprised even him. The nurse blinked. Ms. Romano, 3 years. She's one of our best pediatric nurses. The kids love her. The kids love her, Dante repeated softly. Of course they did. He'd watched her with his nephew, Luca, after the boy's emergency appendectomy, had seen the way she'd sat beside the terrified 8-year-old through the night, reading him stories and holding his hand when the pain got bad. She'd treated the nephew of a Mafia boss with the same tender care she'd give to anyone. That's when Dante had started watching her. Not creeping, not stalking, he'd simply noticed her. The way she smiled at children, how she always bought coffee for the homeless veteran who sat outside the hospital. The fact that she worked double shifts to cover for coworkers with sick kids of their own. Elena Romano was everything good in a world that had tried to beat the goodness out of Dante long ago. So he'd protected her the only way he knew how, from a distance. Anonymous donations to ensure her department had the best equipment, a quiet word to the hospital administrator about her overdue promotion, making sure the route from the hospital to her apartment stayed well lit and safe. Safe. The word mocked him now. Sir. Dr. Hayes appeared in the doorway. There's a Detective Morrison here. He wants to speak with you about Ms. Romano. Dante's expression hardened. Tell him to wait. He's insisting? Then he can insist all he wants. Dante finally tore his gaze from Elena's still form. He'll speak to me when I'm ready, not before. Dr. Hayes nodded and disappeared. Marco. Dante's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. Find out who did this. I want names, locations, every detail of their miserable lives, and I want it by sunrise. Already working on it, boss. Pulled the parking garage footage. There's something you need to see. They moved to a small private waiting room Marco had commandeered. His laptop sat open on a table, surveillance footage frozen on the screen. Marco hit play. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. Elena appeared on screen, walking toward her car, a modest sedan parked under a flickering light. She was in scrubs, her messenger bag slung over one shoulder, looking tired but content. She'd probably just finished a shift. Then a figure emerged from between two vehicles. Male, tall, dressed in dark clothing with a hood obscuring his face. Professional. Deliberate. Elena barely had time to turn before he raised his weapon. The shot was silent on the recording, but Dante saw her body jerk, saw her hand fly to her chest, saw her crumple to the concrete like a puppet with cut strings. The shooter stood over her for a moment, checking his work, then vanished into the shadows. The entire attack lasted 8 seconds. "That's a professional hit," Marco said quietly. "Clean, efficient. He knew exactly where to wait, exactly when she'd be there." "Which means someone wanted her dead specifically." Dante's voice was arctic cold. "This wasn't random. Pull her patient records, her personal life, everything. Someone wanted Elena Romano eliminated, and I'm going to find out why." "Boss, if this is connected to our business, she's a pediatric nurse." Dante bit off each word. "She saves children's lives. What possible connection could she have to our world?" Marco's silence was answer enough. In their world, innocence meant nothing. Collateral damage was a Tuesday. Dante's phone rang. Unknown number. "What?" he snarled. "Mr. Salvatore." The voice was smooth, cultured, with the faintest trace of a Russian accent. "I believe we have a mutual problem." Every muscle in Dante's body went rigid. "Who is this?" "A concerned party. Your nurse, Elena Romano. She witnessed something she shouldn't have 3 weeks ago. Senator Kellerman's meeting at the Olympia Hotel. She was treating a child in the next suite. She saw too much." Senator Kellerman, the greedy politician who'd been causing problems with the waterfront deal. And the Olympia Hotel, a neutral ground where the Russian Bratva conducted business. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "If she dies," Dante said softly, "I will burn your entire organization to the ground." A dry chuckle. "That's the beauty of it, Mr. Salvatore. She's not supposed to die. The shooter was meant to scare her, send a message, but it seems he got overzealous. Now we have a mess." "You sent a professional to scare a nurse by shooting her in the chest?" "These things happen, but we're not unreasonable men. The senator wants this cleaned up quietly. The girl knows nothing useful. She barely glanced into the room. But he's paranoid. Old age, you understand. What do you want?" "Your cooperation. The senator has friends in very high places. One word from us, and your waterfront expansion dies. Your shipments get flagged, your businesses get audited, cooperate, and everyone profits." Dante's smile was terrifying. "You made one critical error." "Oh?" "You touched what's mine, and there's no profit margin generous enough to make me forget that." He ended the call and hurled the phone against the wall, watching it shatter with cold satisfaction. "Boss?" Marco's hand moved to his weapon instinctively. "The Russians are working with Senator Kellerman. Elena witnessed something at the Olympia Hotel 3 weeks ago. Probably just wrong place, wrong time. They sent a hitter to scare her, but he botched the job." Dante's mind was already working through scenarios, cataloging assets and allies. "They think I'll play nice to protect the waterfront deal. Will you?" Dante turned to face his second, and Marco actually took a step back at what he saw in those dark eyes. "I'm going to remind everyone in this city exactly why my name makes grown men cross themselves." Dante's voice was soft as silk and twice as deadly. "The Russians want to negotiate? Fine. We'll negotiate, right after I mail pieces of their hitman back to Moscow. That'll start a war." "Good." Dante headed for the door. "I'm in the mood for one." He returned to the surgical floor where Dr. Petrov, a silver-haired man who'd patched up more bullet wounds than any civilian doctor had right to, was conferring with Dr. Hayes. "Mr. Salvatore." Petrov's accent was thick but his English perfect. "Miss Romano is very lucky. Few centimeters different, and we're having different conversation. How long until she wakes up?" 6, maybe 8 hours. She'll be in ICU for several days, then recovery ward. If no complications, she could be released in 2 weeks. 2 weeks in a hospital bed, vulnerable and exposed. Unacceptable. I'm moving her to my private facility as soon as she's stable enough for transport." Dr. Hayes frowned. "Mr. Salvatore, with all due respect, this hospital has security cameras that can be hacked and staff that can be bribed." Dante's tone left no room for argument. "My facility has trained guards, private doctors, and walls that could withstand a siege. Which do you think will keep her safer? The doctors exchanged glances. She'll receive the best care possible, Dante continued. Dr. Petrov, you'll oversee her treatment personally. Dr. Hayes, if you're willing, I'd like you on the team as well. Double your current salary. Dr. Hayes studied him for a long moment. You care about her. It wasn't a question, but Dante answered anyway. Yes. Then you should know. When she wakes up, she's going to have questions, and she's not the type to accept evasive answers. A ghost of a smile touched Dante's lips. No, Elena wouldn't accept evasion. She'd looked him dead in the eye 6 months ago and asked if his nephew's appendectomy could have been prevented with better diet. When Dante had bristled, she'd simply raised an eyebrow and waited for an answer. She was brave and honest and completely unsuited for his world of shadows and lies, which was exactly why he'd tried to stay away. I'll handle it, he said. Detective Morrison was a bulldog of a man in his 50s, with a cheap suit and sharp eyes that had seen too much. He rose from a waiting room chair when Dante entered, Marco looming behind his boss like a well-dressed threat. Mr. Salvatore, I need to ask you some questions about Elena Romano. Then ask quickly. Morrison's jaw tightened. What's your relationship with her? She's a nurse who treated my nephew. I've made charitable donations to this hospital in gratitude. Your phone number is her emergency contact. Dante's expression revealed nothing. Ms. Romano has no family in this country. When I learned this, I offered to ensure she'd have someone to call if needed. Pure charity, detective. It was technically true. Elena's parents had died in a car accident 5 years ago, and her only sibling, a sister, lived somewhere in Europe. Dante had discovered this during his background checks and quietly had his information added to her hospital records. For her protection, he told himself. Morrison didn't look convinced. You wouldn't happen to know why someone would want to shoot a pediatric nurse, would you? If I did, detective, you'd be investigating a homicide right now instead of an attempted murder. The threat hung in the air like cordite. Morrison leaned back, studying Dante with the weariness of a man who'd spent decades watching powerful people evade justice. Look, I know who you are. I know what you are. But that girl in there, she's clean, not so much as a parking ticket. So either someone made a hell of a mistake or there's something bigger going on. Then I suggest you find out which. Dante turned to leave, then paused. Detective, when you catch the shooter, and you will, I want to know immediately. That's not how this works. It is now. Dante left Morrison standing there, his mind already moving to the next problem. The Russians had made their opening move, but they'd underestimated one crucial factor. Dante Salvatore protected what was his with the same ruthless efficiency he used to destroy his enemies. And Elena Romano, whether she knew it or not, was his. The thought should have troubled him. Instead, it felt like a key turning in a lock he'd kept closed for 6 months. Marco's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then at Dante. Our contact in the Russian organization wants to meet. Says he has information about the shooter. Location? The Olympia Hotel. 1 hour? The same place Elena had witnessed whatever had put a target on her back. Poetic. Tell him we'll be there. Dante's smile was razor sharp. And Marco? Bring the heavy artillery. I have a feeling this conversation won't be entirely civilized. They returned to the ICU, where Elena had been moved to a private room, the most secure one in the hospital, now guarded by 2 of Dante's men in addition to hospital security. Through the window, he could see her still form, surrounded by machines and monitors. So small, so fragile. He remembered the first time he'd really looked at her, beyond just a competent nurse doing her job. Luca had been terrified of the dark hospital room, crying for his mother. Elena had sat on the edge of his bed and started talking about the stars, how they were always there even when you couldn't see them, how darkness was just light waiting to happen. Dante had stood in the doorway, transfixed. When was the last time anyone had spoken of light in his presence? Later, he'd watched her in the cafeteria, buying lunch for a medical student who'd forgotten his wallet. Saw her stop to tie an elderly patient's shoelaces without being asked. Witnessed her fierce advocacy for a teenager whose parents wanted to refuse necessary treatment. Elena Romano was proof that goodness existed in the world, and someone had tried to extinguish it. Boss, Marco checked his watch. We need to go if we're making that meeting. Dante nodded, but didn't move. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd committed to memory months ago but had never called. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Hi, this is Elena. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll call you back as soon as I can. If this is about a patient, please contact the hospital directly. Thanks. Her voice was warm and bright, with a hint of laughter in it. Hearing it now, knowing she lay unconscious and bleeding just meters away, made something crack in Dante's chest. He ended the call without leaving a message. What would he even say? I've been watching you for 6 months like a stalker. Someone tried to kill you because of a senator and the Russian Mafia. I'm about to start a war over you. By the way, I might be falling in love with you. Yeah, that would go well. Let's go, he said instead. The Russians are waiting. They took 2 SUVs. Marco drove the first with Dante and 2 guards, while another 4 men followed in the second vehicle. The Olympia Hotel was a gleaming tower of glass and steel in the financial district, the kind of place where millionaires close deals over $1,000 scotch. It was also, Dante knew, where the Sokolov family conducted business that would make those millionaires soil their expensive suits. The lobby was all marble and gold trim, dripping with old money respectability. A concierge directed them to a private conference room on the 20th floor without batting an eye at the obvious weapons bulking under his men's jackets. Money bought silence. Enough money bought anything. Viktor Sokolov was waiting in the conference room, a bear of a man in his 60s, with cold blue eyes and hands that had strangled the life from more men than Dante had killed bullets. 2 bodyguards flanked him, hands resting casually on their sidearms. Salvatore, Victor's accent was thick as molasses. Glad you could make time in your busy schedule. Victor. Dante took a seat across from him, Marco at his shoulder. Let's skip the pleasantries. You tried to kill Elena Romano. That was a mistake. Not kill, scare. Big difference. Not to her. Victor spread his hands. His business, nothing personal. Senator has concerns. Girl sees wrong thing at wrong time. He wants problem solved. She's not a problem. She's a nurse. With eyes and mouth, da. Could talk to wrong people, cause trouble for Senator's business partners. Victor leaned forward. Our business partners, Salvatore. This waterfront deal, it benefits both our families. Why risk it for one girl? Because, Dante said softly, that one girl is worth more than every criminal in this room combined, including me. Silence fell like a shroud. Victor's eyes narrowed. You have feelings for this nurse. What I have is a problem with people who touch what's mine. Where's the shooter? Already handled. He exceeded orders, made mess. We take care of our mistakes. Which meant the hitman was dead, his body probably feeding fish in the harbor. Convenient. Not good enough, Dante said. You came at her once. Who's to say you won't try again? Because now we make agreement, yes? You ensure girl keeps quiet about what she saw, which is nothing, really, just nervous old senator, and we ensure waterfront deal proceeds smoothly. Everyone profits, everyone happy. Dante studied the Russian mob boss, reading the truth beneath the words. Victor didn't actually care about Elena. This was a power play, testing boundaries, seeing how far he could push before Dante pushed back. Well, time to push. Here's my agreement, Dante said. Elena Romano is off limits, permanently. Anyone in your organization so much as looks at her wrong, I'll consider it an act of war. You'll inform Senator Kellerman that his paranoia is his problem, not mine. And you'll make sure everyone in this city knows that harming one hair on her head means death. Victor's face darkened. You make demands? This is not how negotiation works. I'm not negotiating. Dante rose smoothly. I'm telling you how this ends. You can accept these terms, or you can test me. But I promise, Victor, that test won't go the way you hope. You start war over one woman? Victor stood as well, his bodyguards tensing. This is madness. Then call me mad. Dante's smile was arctic. You have until sunrise to decide. After that, Any of your men still in the city becomes fair game. He turned to leave, Marco and his guards forming up around him. Salvatore! Victor's voice cracked like a whip. You forget who you're threatening. Dante looked back over his shoulder, his dark eyes empty of everything except cold promise. No, Victor. I remember exactly who I'm threatening. The question is, do you remember who I am? They left the Russians in stunned silence. In the elevator, Marco let out a low whistle. Boss, you just declared war on the Bratva over a girl you've never even had a conversation with. Wrong. Dante's voice was quiet. I declared war on anyone who thinks they can hurt her without consequences. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. His phone rang. Dr. Petrov. She's awake, the doctor said without preamble, and asking questions. Dante's heart lurched. I'm on my way. The drive back to the hospital took an eternity and no time at all. Dante's mind raced, cataloging 1,000 things he needed to say, needed to explain. How did you tell someone that they'd been shot because of things they didn't know, people they'd never met, a world they couldn't imagine? How did you tell someone you'd been watching over them like a guardian angel or a stalking devil, depending on your perspective? How did you tell someone you might just burn the world down to keep them safe? He reached Elena's ICU room to find Dr. Hayes in quiet conversation with her patient. Through the glass, he could see Elena propped up slightly in bed, her face pale but alert, her dark eyes tracking the doctor's words. Then those eyes found him through the window. Everything stopped. Elena's expression cycled through confusion, recognition, fear, and finally settled on something that looked like determination. She said something to Dr. Hayes, who glanced at Dante and nodded. A moment later, the doctor emerged. She wants to see you, Dr. Hayes said. But I need to warn you, she's scared and confused. Whatever you say in there, make it count. Dante nodded, straightened his jacket, and entered the room. Elena Romano watched him approach with eyes that had seen him exactly once before, 6 months ago in her nephew's hospital room. She'd probably written him off as a concerned uncle, nothing more. Now those eyes were full of questions he didn't know how to answer. Mr. Salvatore, she said, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube. They said you're my emergency contact, that you've been paying for my care. Yes. Why? Such a simple question, such an impossible answer. Because you saved my nephew's life, he said carefully, and I wanted to ensure you were protected. Protected from what? I'm a nurse. I work at a hospital. Who would want to... She trailed off, her hand moving unconsciously to her bandaged chest. Someone shot me. Yes. Do you know why? Dante moved closer to her bed, his movements careful and deliberate. Yes, and I promise you, they will never get close to you again. Elena's eyes narrowed. That's not an answer. That's a threat. Smart girl. It's a promise, he corrected. There's a difference. Is there? She studied him with an intensity that made him feel exposed, as if she could see straight through the expensive suit and cold demeanor to whatever was left of his soul. Who are you really, Mr. Salvatore? Someone who's going to keep you safe. That's still not an answer. Despite everything, the shooting, the Russians, the war he'd just started, Dante felt his lips twitch. You're very persistent. You're very evasive. Elena's gaze didn't waver. The nurses whisper about you, about your donations, about how the hospital administrator treats you like royalty, about the men with guns who guard your nephew's room. What do you want me to say? The truth would be nice. The truth. That he was a criminal, a killer, a man who'd built his empire on blood and fear. That she'd witnessed something 3 weeks ago that had put her on a hit list. That he'd been watching her for months like an obsessed fool, unable to stay away but too afraid to get close. That looking at her now, pale and hurting but still fierce, made him want to be someone different, someone worthy of that fierce gaze. The truth, he said slowly, is complicated. Then uncomplicate it. You witnessed something 3 weeks ago at the Olympia Hotel. You were treating a child there. Elena's brow furrowed. The Baker family. Their daughter had an asthma attack during their vacation. I was there on a consult from the hospital. Do you remember anything unusual? She trailed off, thinking. There were men in the suite next door, loud voices. The little girl was scared, so I focused on calming her down. I barely glanced at... Her eyes widened. Senator Kellerman. He was one of the men. I remember seeing him in passing. What else? Nothing. I was there less than 15 minutes. Elena's voice sharpened with fear. Are you saying someone shot me because I saw a senator at a hotel? I'm saying, Dante said carefully, that the senator is paranoid and has dangerous friends. They made a mistake. I'm correcting it. By doing what exactly? Whatever's necessary. Elena stared at him for a long moment. Then, impossibly, she laughed, a short, pained sound. You're either insane or exactly what the nurses whisper about. Probably both. Mr. Salvatore, Dante, he interrupted. Call me Dante. Dante, then. Her voice softened slightly. I appreciate whatever you've done for me, truly, but I don't need a... whatever you are. I'll talk to the police, tell them what I saw, which is nothing, and this will all blow over. It won't. You don't know that. Yes, he said quietly. I do. Because I know the people involved. And they don't leave loose ends. Fear flashed across her face, quickly replaced by anger. So what? I'm just supposed to hide? Let you fight my battles? If that's what keeps you alive, yes. That's not your decision to make. Elena, I don't even know you. Her voice rose, making machines beep in protest. You show up like some kind of dark knight, making promises and threats, acting like you have some claim on my life. We've met once. Once. You don't get to decide my future. She was right. Absolutely, completely right. It didn't change anything. I understand your anger, Dante said. But right now, your understanding isn't required. Only your safety matters. To who? You? Yes. The single word hung between them, heavy with implications. Elena's expression shifted, confusion mixing with something that might have been curiosity. Why do you care? Because you make me believe in light. Because you save children and buy coffee for homeless veterans and see good in people who don't deserve it. Because in 6 months of watching you, I've seen more humanity than in 34 years of my own life. Because the thought of you bleeding out in a parking garage makes me want to tear this city apart brick by brick. Because, he said instead, someone should. Before Elena could respond, the door burst open. Marco stood there, his expression grim. Boss, we have a problem. Dante didn't want to leave, but the urgency in Marco's tone demanded attention. He looked back at Elena, memorizing her face, alive, awake, fighting. We're not done with this conversation, she said. No, he agreed. We're not. Outside, Marco lowered his voice. The Russians aren't waiting until sunrise. 3 of our warehouses just got hit. Simultaneous raids. They're sending a message. Dante's expression went glacial. Then it's time to send one back. He glanced through the window one last time at Elena, who was watching him with those penetrating dark eyes. This was why he'd stayed away, why he'd kept his distance. His world devoured everything good it touched, but it was too late now. Whether she wanted it or not, Elena Romano was part of his world, and Dante Salvatore was going to burn down anyone who tried to take her from it. The war room in Dante's compound was a study in controlled chaos. Maps of the city sprawled across a massive table, marked with colored pins denoting territories, assets, and now, targets. His top lieutenants gathered around like generals planning a siege, their faces grim in the harsh fluorescent light. 3 warehouses, Marco reported, pointing to red X's on the map. The one on 5th Street, the shipping facility near the docks, and the storage unit in Riverside, all hit within 20 minutes of each other. Professional teams in and out clean. Casualties? Dante's voice was ice. 2 of our guys at the docks, both dead. The others got out before the Russians torched the buildings. Dante's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. 2 men. 2 families who would wake up tomorrow without fathers, brothers, sons. The fury in his chest burned hotter, but his face remained a mask of cold calculation. Inventory loss? Roughly $4 million in merchandise. The shipping manifests were encrypted, so they didn't get intel, just destruction. $4 million. A flesh wound to his operation, nothing more. But the message was clear. Viktor Sokolov wasn't backing down. Good. Neither was he. Double the guard on all remaining facilities, Dante ordered. I want eyes on every Russian-owned business in the city. Banks, clubs, legitimate fronts. Everything. And find out where Viktor's staying. He didn't fly back to Moscow after our meeting. Already on it, boss. This from Tony Greco, his head of intelligence, a wiry man in his 40s with the unsettling ability to find information that didn't want to be found. Viktor's holed up at the Grandstone Towers penthouse suite. Got 8 men with him, maybe more. Security? Building's got decent surveillance, private elevator to the penthouse, 1 stairwell access. He's feeling confident. Dante's smile was predatory. Confidence makes men careless. What about Senator Kellerman? That's where it gets interesting. Tony pulled up a tablet, swiping through documents. The senator's been very busy. 3 days after Elena Romano's shift at the Olympia Hotel, he met with Viktor again. Then he met with someone from the DA's office, then someone from Homeland Security. The implications settled over the room like a shroud. He's building a case, Marco muttered, using the Russians to gather dirt on our operations, then feeding it to federal investigators. While positioning himself as the crusading politician fighting organized crime, Dante's laugh was bitter. Clever bastard. He gets to be a hero and eliminate competition at the same time. So what's our play? Tony asked. Dante studied the map, his mind working through scenarios with the precision of a master chess player. Viktor expected retaliation, probably had his men on high alert, waiting for Dante to strike back in anger. The senator expected Dante to either cave to pressure or make a mistake that would give the feds ammunition. They were both thinking too small. We're not going after Viktor, Dante said. Not yet. His men exchanged surprised glances. Then what? We're going after their credibility, their leverage. Dante tapped the map. The senator's been taking bribes from the Russians for 2 years. Tony, I want documentation. Bank records, meeting transcripts, photos, everything. If he's dirty, we expose him. That'll take time, boss. Maybe weeks. You have 48 hours. Dante's tone left no room for argument. As for Viktor, he thinks burning our warehouses sends a message. Let's send a better one. Marco, I want his supply lines choked. Every shipment coming into the city gets delayed, inspected, or lost. Every contact he has in customs, shipping, transportation, we make them unavailable. Economic warfare, Marco said with approval. Hit him in the wallet. Exactly. We don't need to kill anyone yet. We just need to make Viktor understand that protecting a paranoid senator's interests is far more expensive than leaving Elena alone. And if he doesn't get the message? Dante's expression hardened. Then we escalate. But on my terms, not his. His phone buzzed. Dr. Petrov. Mr. Salvatore, I'm moving Miss Romano to a private recovery room. She's stable enough to leave ICU, but I recommend keeping her hospitalized for at least another week before transport to your facility. A week. 7 days of vulnerability, of Elena being accessible to anyone with enough determination and a hospital badge. Increase security on her floor, Dante said. No one gets near her room without clearance, and doctor, keep me updated on every detail of her condition. Of course. He ended the call to find Marco watching him with an expression that was almost sympathetic. You're in deep, boss. I'm aware. Does she know? About us? About what we do? She suspects. Dante remembered the sharp intelligence in Elena's eyes, the way she dissected his evasions with surgical precision. But suspecting and knowing are different things. And when she knows for certain, when she realizes you're not just some wealthy philanthropist playing guardian angel, then she'll make her choice. The words tasted like ash, and I'll respect it. Even if it killed him. Marco shook his head. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. That girl saved Luca's life. She deserves protection. It's not about deserve. Dante's voice was quiet. It never was. Understanding flickered across Marco's scarred face, but he was smart enough not to pursue it further. The meeting continued for another hour, strategies refined, orders distributed. By the time Dante's men dispersed into the pre-dawn darkness, a plan was in motion that would either secure Elena's safety or ignite a war that would consume the city. Dante returned to the hospital as the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The beauty of it felt obscene against the violence churning in his chest. He'd been awake for nearly 24 hours, fueled by coffee and fury, but exhaustion was a luxury he couldn't afford. Elena's new room was on the 7th floor, at the end of a quiet corridor. 2 of his men stood guard outside, their presence drawing nervous glances from passing nurses. Inside, Dr. Hayes was checking Elena's vitals. "Mr. Salvatore?" The doctor's tone was professionally neutral, but her eyes held a warning. "Your patient is doing well physically, but she's asking difficult questions." "I'd expect nothing less. She also asked me to tell you that she doesn't want to see you." The words hit harder than they should have. Did she say why? She said, and I quote, "I need time to think without him looming over me like a beautiful, terrifying storm cloud." Dr. Hayes' lips twitched. Her words, not mine. Beautiful, terrifying, storm cloud. Dante didn't know whether to laugh or punch the wall. "I'll respect her wishes," he said instead, "but the security stays." "She won't like that either." "She'll like being dead even less." Dr. Hayes sighed. "I can't argue with that logic, as much as I might want to." She gathered her tablet and headed for the door, then paused. "Mr. Salvatore, whatever you're involved in, whatever danger she's facing, Elena Romano is stronger than she looks. Don't underestimate her." "I wouldn't dream of it." Alone in the hallway, Dante moved to the window of Elena's room. She was awake, staring at the ceiling with an expression of profound frustration. Even pale and bandaged, even furious, she was breathtaking. He'd spent 6 months convincing himself that distance was protection, that watching over her from the shadows was enough, that his feelings were nothing more than misplaced gratitude for saving Luca. The lie had been comfortable. His phone rang, shattering the moment. "Tony." "Boss, we've got a problem. Just heard from our contact in the police department. Detective Morrison's being taken off Elena's case." Dante's blood chilled. "By whose order?" "Came from the top. Captain Reynolds himself. Said the case was being transferred to a special task force." A task force. Federal involvement. Senator Kellerman was moving faster than anticipated. "Find out who's on this task force. I want names, backgrounds, and who's signing their paychecks." "Already digging, but boss, there's more. Morrison's pissed. He thinks something's dirty about the whole thing. He wants to meet." "Where?" "O'Brien's bar. 1 hour." O'Brien's was a cop dive, the kind of place where off-duty police drank to forget the things they'd seen. It was also neutral ground, a place where a man like Dante Salvatore could have a conversation without automatic assumption of criminal activity. "Tell him I'll be there." He took one last look at Elena through the window. She'd turned her head and was staring directly at him, her dark eyes unreadable. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other through the glass, a barrier that was both physical and metaphorical. Then she deliberately turned away. Message received. O'Brien smelled like beer, desperation, and decades of cigarette smoke that no amount of cleaning could erase. Detective Morrison sat in a corner booth, nursing a whiskey that probably wasn't his first. He looked up as Dante approached, his expression sour. "Didn't think you'd actually show. You said it was important." Dante slid into the booth, declining the bartender's questioning look. No drinks. He needed his mind sharp. Morrison took a long swallow. "Elena Romano's case is being buried. Officially, it's an ongoing investigation, but I've seen this dance before. Task force takes over, evidence disappears, witnesses get intimidated or bought off, and eventually the case goes cold." "Who gave the order?" "Can't prove it, but I'd bet my pension it came from Senator Kellerman's office. He's got friends at every level, local, state, federal. Man could make Jimmy Hoffa disappear twice." "Why are you telling me this?" Morrison's laugh was harsh. "Because I'm a cop, Mr. Salvatore. A real one. The kind who actually gives a damn about victims. That girl in the hospital, she helps kids for a living. She doesn't deserve to be a footnote in some politician's power play." "No," Dante agreed quietly. "She doesn't. But here's the thing. I can't protect her. Not officially. The minute I push too hard, I'm off the force, or worse. Morrison leaned forward, his bloodshot eyes intense. But you don't play by the same rules. You've got resources, connections, the kind of reach that makes powerful people nervous. You're asking me to do your job. I'm asking you to do what needs to be done. The detective drained his glass. Look, I know what you are. I've spent 20 years trying to put men like you in prison, but right now, you're the only thing standing between Elena Romano and a shallow grave. So yeah, I'm asking. Dante studied the older man, seeing the conflict written in every line of his weathered face. Morrison was a good cop in a corrupt system, playing by rules that only applied to some people. What do you need from me? Dante asked. Keep her safe. Find out who really ordered the hit, and when you do, Morrison met his gaze. Make them regret it. I don't need to know details, just handle it. That's asking me to commit murder, detective. That's asking you to do what you do anyway, just with a righteous target this time. Morrison stood, tossing bills on the table. The shooter's body washed up in the harbor this morning. Whoever killed him wanted to tie up loose ends, but bodies have a way of talking if you know how to listen. Where is it now? City morgue, autopsies scheduled for this afternoon. Morrison pulled out a business card, scrawling something on the back. This is the medical examiner's direct line. Dr. Chen, he owes me a favor. Tell him I sent you. Dante pocketed the card. Why are you really doing this, Morrison? The detective's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Because 15 years ago, my daughter had leukemia. She spent 8 months at St. Mary's. There was this nurse, young, barely out of school, who sat with my little girl every night when the pain got bad. Told her stories, held her hand, made her laugh when she should have been crying. His voice roughened. That nurse's name was Elena Romano, and my daughter's alive today partly because of her. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Your daughter is healthy, married, just gave me my first grandkid. Morrison's smile was brief but genuine. Elena probably doesn't even remember her. She treats every patient like they're the most important person in the world. That's just who she is. Understanding crystallized. This wasn't about justice or duty. This was personal. I'll keep her safe, Dante promised. You have my word. The word of a criminal. Morrison shook his head, but there was something like respect in his eyes. World's gone to hell when that's worth more than a badge. After Morrison left, Dante sat alone in the booth, his mind processing angles and implications. The body in the morgue might provide answers. The senator's connection to the Russians needed exposure, and Elena needed protection from threats she couldn't see coming. His phone buzzed. Marco. Boss, we've got movement. Victor's men just left the Grandstone. 3 SUVs heading east. Follow them. I want to know where they're going and who they're meeting. Already on it. Dante's next call was to Dr. Chen at the city morgue. The medical examiner answered on the second ring, his voice crisp and professional. Dr. Chen speaking. Detective Morrison said you could help me with a body that came in this morning. Male, gunshot wound, pulled from the harbor. A pause. Who is this? Someone who needs answers more than Morrison needs favors repaid. Another pause, longer this time. The autopsy's in an hour. If you want to observe, be here in 40 minutes. And Mr. Salvatore, come alone. The line went dead. So Dr. Chen knew who he was. Interesting. The city morgue was a sterile building that smelled like chemicals and death. Dr. Chen met Dante in a side entrance, a slight Asian man in his 50s with steady hands and eyes that had seen too many bodies. You must be very persuasive to get Morrison to burn a favor on you, Chen said, leading Dante through fluorescent-lit corridors. Let's just say we have a mutual interest. In Elena Romano. Yes, I heard about the shooting. Terrible business. Chen stopped outside an examination room, pulling on latex gloves. The body you're interested in had no identification, no wallet, nothing. But he did have this. He held up an evidence bag containing a small tattoo photo, 3 stars in a triangle formation. Russian prison tattoo, Dante said, indicates rank in the Bratva. So this was a professional hitman. Yes. Then whoever killed him was better. Chen pushed through the doors into the examination room. The body on the table was male, early 30s, with the lean muscle of someone who'd lived violently. His skin had the waxy pallor of death, mottled with decomposition from the water. But it was the wounds that told the story. Single gunshot to the back of the head, Chen narrated, pointing to the entry wound. Execution style. Close range, probably 9mm. Death was instantaneous. Time of death? Best estimate? 12 to 16 hours after he shot Elena Romano. Whoever ordered his death didn't waste time, which meant Victor had killed his own man almost immediately after the botched hit, either to cover his tracks or because failure had consequences. Anything else unusual? Chen moved to the body's hands. Defense wounds on the knuckles. Bruising indicates he fought someone shortly before death. And these, he pointed to marks on the wrists. Ligature marks. He was restrained, probably zip-tied, before being shot. So he was captured, interrogated, then executed. That would be my assessment. Chen covered the body. Whoever did this wanted information first, cleanup second. Dante studied the dead man's face, committing it to memory. This was the person who'd shot Elena, who'd left her bleeding in a parking garage. A tiny part of him wished the man had suffered more before dying. Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Salvatore? Chen's voice stopped him at the door. Morrison thinks you can protect Elena. I hope he's right. She's a good person. The world has too few of those. I know. Back in his car, Dante called Tony. I need everything on Viktor Sokolov's movements the night of the shooting, security footage, witness statements, phone records, everything. Looking for confirmation he ordered the hit? Looking for proof he killed his own man after. If we can tie Victor to both crimes, we have leverage. On it. Also, boss, our people followed those SUVs. They went to a warehouse in the industrial district. Big meeting happening. Looks like Victor's consolidating his forces. For what? Either defense or another attack. Hard to tell. Dante's jaw tightened. Keep watching. And Tony? Accelerates the timeline on Senator Kellerman's dirt. I need it sooner than 48 hours. How much sooner? Yesterday. He ended the call and sat in silence, watching the city move around him. Somewhere in this sprawl of concrete and ambition, Senator Kellerman was pulling strings. Viktor Sokolov was planning his next move, and Elena Romano was lying in a hospital bed, caught in the crossfire of men who saw her as nothing more than a problem to solve. But she wasn't a problem. She was a person. A brilliant, compassionate woman who saved children's lives and saw good in a world that constantly tried to beat it out of people. She was everything Dante wasn't, and he was going to make sure she survived to be those things. His phone rang again. This time, the number made his heart stop. Elena. He answered immediately. Elena. Don't Elena me in that smooth voice like we're friends. Her tone was sharp despite the underlying weakness. I need to talk to you. Now. And this time I want real answers, not evasive non-answers wrapped in expensive suits. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Make it 10. And Dante? Her voice softened almost imperceptibly. Come alone. No bodyguards, no entourage, just you. The line went dead before he could respond. Dante stared at the phone, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. She'd called him. Despite her anger, despite her fear, despite everything, she'd reached out. Maybe there was hope after all. He made the drive in 8 minutes, breaking at least a dozen traffic laws. His men outside Elena's room looked surprised when he arrived alone, but they knew better than to question. Inside, Elena sat propped against pillows, looking both fragile and fierce. She'd managed to pull her hair into a messy bun, and someone had brought her actual clothes, yoga pants and an oversized sweater that swallowed her small frame. You came fast, she observed. You asked. That simple? That simple. Elena studied him with those penetrating dark eyes. Sit down. You hovering makes me nervous. Dante took the chair beside her bed, close enough to touch but carefully maintaining distance. What do you want to know? Everything. And don't even think about lying to me. I've spent 3 years reading people in crisis. I know when someone's hiding something. Where should I start? Start with who you really are, not the philanthropist story. The truth. Dante met her gaze, knowing this moment would define everything that came after. He could lie, spin a comfortable fiction, keep her in the dark for her own protection, or he could give her the respect she deserved and let her make her own choices. My name is Dante Salvatore. I run a criminal organization that controls significant portions of this city's underground economy. Drug distribution, illegal gambling, protection rackets, money laundering. If it's profitable and illegal, I probably have a hand in it. Elena's face went carefully blank. You're a mobster. That's the polite term. And you've been, what, watching me for 6 months? Yes. Why? Because you saved my nephew's life and asked for nothing in return. Because I watched you treat him with kindness and dignity, even though you had no idea who I was. Because in a world full of people trying to take from each other, you only gave. That's not a reason to stalk someone. I wasn't stalking. I was protecting. From what? Her voice rose. I'm a nurse. What could I possibly need protection from? From my world bleeding into yours. From people who would use you to get to me. From... He stopped, struggling for words. From everything I touched turning to ash. Silence fell between them, heavy and fraught. 3 weeks ago, Elena said slowly, I saw Senator Kellerman at the Olympia Hotel. That's what this is about, isn't it? That's why I was shot. Yes, the senator's involved with the Russian Mafia. You witnessed a meeting you shouldn't have. They wanted to scare you into silence, but the hitman they sent got overenthusiastic. And you know this because I know Viktor Sokolov, the Russian mob boss, and because I've spent the last 24 hours dismantling everything connected to your shooting. Elena's hand moved to her bandaged chest. The man who shot me is dead. Victor killed him for botching the job. How do you know that? Because I just came from seeing his body in the morgue. She flinched. You say that so casually, like death is just normal for you. It is. Dante's voice was quiet. I've killed people, Elena. Ordered deaths, pulled triggers, watched men die by my hand. I'm not a good man. I'm not even sure I'm a man anymore, not in any way that matters. Then why are you helping me? The question hung in the air like a prayer. Because, Dante said slowly, choosing each word with care, when I look at you, I remember what goodness looks like. You make me believe that maybe, just maybe, not everything is corrupt and broken. And the thought of your light being snuffed out because of men like me, because of a world I helped create. His voice roughened. I can't let that happen. Elena's eyes glistened. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Probably accurate. And also the most romantic, which makes me furious because I should be terrified of you right now. You should be. But I'm not. She shook her head. I should be. You just confessed to being a criminal, to killing people, to running an illegal empire. Every rational instinct I have is screaming at me to call security and have you arrested. So why don't you? Because you saved my nephew's life by paying for the surgeon who removed his appendix before it ruptured. Because you've donated millions to my hospital without asking for recognition. Because your men have been standing guard outside my room for 2 days, and the nurses tell me they're unfailingly polite. She paused. And because when you look at me, I don't see a monster. I see someone desperately trying to protect something they think they don't deserve. Dante felt something crack in his chest. You're wrong. About which part? The deserving part. I don't deserve you, not your kindness, not your understanding, certainly not... He stopped himself. Not what? Nothing. Dante? His name on her lips was both a question and a command. Finish the sentence. Not your care. The admission cost him. I don't deserve for you to care whether I live or die. Elena reached out slowly, her hand trembling slightly from medication and injury. Her fingers brushed his, warm and alive. What if I told you that I get to decide what you deserve? Not you, not your past, not whatever crimes you think define you, me. Elena, I'm not saying I'm okay with what you do. I'm not saying I approve of violence or crime or any of it. Her grip tightened. But I'm also not saying you're beyond redemption. People aren't that simple. You barely know me. Then let me know you. Her eyes held his. The real you. Not the mob boss or the philanthropist or the guardian angel. Just Dante. It was an offer he didn't deserve. An olive branch extended across a chasm of blood and darkness, and heaven help him, he wanted to take it. The real me is dangerous, he warned. I'm a trauma nurse. I've seen dangerous. Not like this. Then show me. Challenge flickered in her eyes. Show me who you really are, and let me make my own decisions about it. Before Dante could respond, his phone exploded with alerts. Text messages from Marco, Tony, 3 other lieutenants, all saying the same thing. Victor was moving. 3 more of his warehouses were under attack. This time, the Russians weren't just burning property, they were killing anyone they found inside. I have to go, Dante said, standing abruptly. What's wrong? The war I started to protect you just escalated. People are dying. Elena's face paled. Because of me? Because of men who think violence solves everything. He headed for the door, then stopped. Elena, what you asked about knowing the real me? This is who I am. A man who starts wars and watches people die. Remember that. He left before she could respond, her voice calling his name echoing down the hallway. In the elevator, he called Marco. Status. It's bad, boss. They hit us hard. 8 dead so far, maybe more. These aren't warning shots. Victor's trying to cripple us. Location? Main warehouse on Dock Street. Fire department's on scene, but our people need extraction. I'm 10 minutes out. And Marco? Initiate Protocol 7. Protocol 7. Full mobilization. War footing. Boss, are you sure Victor wants to dance? Let's dance. The warehouse district was a war zone. Smoke billowed into the night sky from 3 different locations, orange flames licking at the darkness like hungry demons. Fire trucks screamed through narrow streets, while police tried to establish perimeters around chaos they didn't understand and couldn't control. This wasn't their jurisdiction anymore. This was the underworld settling scores in blood and fire. Dante's SUV screeched to a halt 2 blocks from the main warehouse on Dock Street. He could see the inferno from here, flames consuming the 3-story structure that had housed legitimate shipping operations and significantly less legitimate merchandise. The heat was so intense it warped the air, turning the night into a shimmering hellscape. Marco met him at the vehicle, his face streaked with soot and blood that wasn't his own. Boss, we got most of our people out, but 3 are still unaccounted for. The Russians came in fast, military precision. They knew exactly where to hit and when. Someone fed them intel. Dante's voice was deadly calm despite the rage burning beneath his skin. Someone in our organization told them our schedule. That's what I'm thinking. This wasn't luck. They knew which warehouses had inventory, which had personnel, which routes our guys would use to escape. A traitor. The word tasted like poison. Dante had built his empire on loyalty, on the unbreakable code that his people were family. Someone had violated that trust, and 8 men were dead because of it. Start vetting everyone who had access to warehouse schedules. I want phone records, financial statements, anything that might show who flipped. Dante moved toward the burning building, his expensive shoes crunching on broken glass and debris. What about the Russians? Any casualties on their side? 2 that we know of. Our guys at the Riverside location managed to fight back before the place went up. Caught one of Victor's men in the crossfire. Where's the body? Still inside. Fire's too hot to recover anything. Dante surveyed the destruction, calculating losses in his head. The merchandise could be replaced. The buildings could be rebuilt. But the 8 men who'd died tonight, fathers, sons, brothers, they were gone forever. Their families would receive compensation, their children would be provided for, but no amount of money could fill the holes their deaths would leave. This was the cost of his world, the price of power measured in lives. And it was all because he'd chosen to protect one woman. The thought should have made him reconsider, should have made him question whether Elena Romano was worth this bloodshed. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see was her hand reaching for his, warm and alive, offering him something he'd never dared to want. No, she was worth it. She was worth everything. His phone buzzed. Tony, calling from the command center Dante had established in his compound's secure basement. Boss, I've got something. Senator Kellerman's financial records just got very interesting. Talk to me. 3 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, regular deposits over the past 2 years, always in amounts just under the federal reporting threshold. Total intake? Roughly $12 million. $12 million in bribes. Enough to buy a senator's soul several times over. Can you trace the deposits back to Victor? Working on it, but there's a shell company involved. Lots of layers. Give me another few hours. You have 2. I need ammunition, Tony. Something concrete enough to burn Kellerman publicly. What about the Russians? You want me to tie them to the senator directly? No. Dante's mind was already working through the play. Keep Victor's involvement buried for now. Let Kellerman think he's safe, that his connection to the Bratva is still secret. Arrogant men make mistakes when they feel untouchable. You're going to use the senator to get to Victor. Exactly. Kellerman's paranoia started this mess. His fear of Elena exposing something she barely saw. We use that paranoia against him, make him so desperate to cover his tracks that he turns on his Russian partners. Divide and conquer. I like it. Tony's keyboard clacked in the background. There's something else. Hospital security flagged an incident an hour ago. Someone tried to access the 7th floor using a stolen badge. Your guys caught him before he got near Elena's room. Ice flooded Dante's veins. Where is he now? Basement holding room, zip-tied to a chair. Marco's guys are babysitting him until you decide what to do. I'm on my way. Have the bastard ready to talk. He turned to Marco. Get our people secured and accounted for. I want families notified personally, not through intermediaries, and double security at every remaining facility. If Victor wants to play target practice, let's make sure we're shooting back. What about retaliation? Our guys are asking when we hit back. Soon. Dante's expression was granite. But smart. Victor expects us to come at him like a hammer. We're going to be a scalpel instead. The drive back to his compound took 15 minutes through streets that seemed darker than usual, as if the city itself could sense the violence brewing beneath its surface. Dante spent the time on his phone, coordinating with his remaining lieutenants, checking on the families of the fallen, making sure every detail of his empire's defense was airtight, but part of his mind kept circling back to Elena. To the way she'd looked at him with something that wasn't quite trust but wasn't quite fear either. To her offer to let her know the real him, as if goodness could somehow coexist with the darkness he carried. She was wrong, of course. People like him didn't get redemption. They got revenge, power, fleeting moments of satisfaction before the emptiness crept back in. But for a moment, one perfect, impossible moment when her hand touched his, he'd almost believed her. The compound was a fortress disguised as a luxury estate. High walls, sophisticated security systems, guards stationed at every entrance. Dante had built it to withstand both physical assault and legal scrutiny, a castle that could defend against enemies with guns or badges. The basement holding room was exactly what it sounded like, a concrete box with soundproof walls and a drain in the floor for easy cleanup. The man zip-tied to the chair was young, maybe mid-20s, with the lean build and dead eyes of someone who'd grown up in violence. 2 of Dante's men flanked him, weapons visible but not pointed. Yet. Leave us, Dante ordered. The guards exchanged glances but obeyed without question. The door sealed shut with a hydraulic hiss, leaving Dante alone with the would-be assassin. What's your name? Dante's voice was conversational, almost friendly. The young man said nothing. Let me rephrase. You tried to access a hospital room tonight using a stolen badge. The room belonged to Elena Romano. I want to know who sent you and what your orders were. You can tell me willingly, or I can make the next few hours extremely unpleasant for you. Still silence. Dante moved closer, studying the man's face. No recognition, no fear, just flat acceptance. This wasn't a professional. Professionals understood self-preservation. This was someone who'd already accepted death as inevitable. You're Russian, Dante observed, but not Bratva. Wrong tattoos, wrong bearing. You're what, hired muscle? Freelance contractor picking up side work? A flicker in the dead eyes. Bingo. Here's what I think happened. Viktor Sokolov put out word he needed someone expendable for a high-risk job. Someone with no direct ties to his organization. Someone who wouldn't matter if they got caught or killed. You needed money badly enough to take the job, even though you knew the odds were terrible. My daughter, the man said suddenly, his accent thick. She needs surgery, $20,000. Victor promised half up front, half when job is done. Dante felt something twist in his chest. Of course, it always came back to desperation, to the impossible choices people made when backed against a wall. What were your orders? Finish what the first man started. Make it look like medical error. Overdose, wrong medication, quiet. Victor said nurse knows too much, must disappear. She knows nothing. Victor doesn't care what she knows. Senator wants her gone. That's enough. So Kellerman was still pushing for Elena's death despite the botched first attempt. The man's paranoia ran deeper than Dante had realized. Your daughter, Dante said slowly. What's wrong with her? Confusion flickered across the man's face. Heart defect. Born with it. Doctors say operation will fix, but insurance doesn't cover. I save for 3 years, almost have enough, then wife gets sick. Medical bills eat everything. A sick daughter. A desperate father. And vultures like Victor who exploited that desperation for their own ends. What's her name? Katya. She's 6 years old. 6. The same age as one of the children Elena had treated. A little girl with leukemia who'd spent months in St. Mary's pediatric ward. Dante had seen Elena reading to her, playing games, making her laugh even when she was too weak to sit up. Here's what's going to happen, Dante said. You're going to tell me everything Victor told you about his operation. Locations, contacts, schedules. In return, I'm going to pay for your daughter's surgery. The best cardiac surgeon in the country, all expenses covered. The man's eyes widened. Why would you? Because the woman you were sent to kill. She saves children for a living. Children like your Katya. And because I'm going to prove to someone very important that not everyone in my world is a monster. I try to kill nurse, you pay for my daughter's life? Yes. This is trick. No trick, but there are conditions. You tell me everything. You never work for Victor again. And you get your daughter out of this city. There's a hospital in the Midwest, Chicago, with an excellent pediatric cardiac unit. They'll take Katya as a patient, and I'll arrange housing for your family while she recovers. The man stared at him like he'd sprouted wings. You are serious. Completely. But if you lie to me, if you hold anything back, the deal's off and we have a very different conversation. Understand? A long pause. Then the man nodded. I understand. I tell you everything. And he did. Over the next hour, Dante learned the locations of 3 safe houses Victor was using, the names of 5 key Bratva operatives in the city, details about weapons shipments coming through the port, and most importantly, confirmation that Senator Kellerman had personally ordered the renewed attempt on Elena's life. Senator calls Victor yesterday, the man explained. Says nurse is liability that must be eliminated, offers extra payment if done within 48 hours. Victor doesn't want to risk his own people again, so he puts out call for contractor. I am desperate, so I take job. How much contact did you have with the senator directly? None. Everything through Victor, but Victor shows me photo, gives me senator's private number in case of emergency. Says if anything goes wrong, call senator directly. You have this number? The man recited it from memory. Dante committed it to memory as well, his mind already cataloging how this information could be weaponized. When the interrogation concluded, Dante called in his men. Get him cleaned up and fed, then contact Dr. Brennan at Chicago Children's Hospital. Tell him I'm sending a patient, cardiac defect, priority case. All expenses on my account. Boss, you're really doing this? Yes, and arrange transportation for his family. I want them on a plane to Chicago by tomorrow night. After his men escorted the Russian out, Dante stood alone in the holding room, staring at the empty chair. The smart play would have been to kill the man, eliminate a witness, send a message to Victor about failed assassination attempts. But Elena's voice echoed in his head. Let me know the real you. Maybe the real him was someone who could choose mercy over murder. Maybe. His phone rang. Dr. Petrov. And the panic in the doctor's voice sent ice through Dante's veins. Mr. Salvatore, you need to return to the hospital immediately. Miss Romano's condition has deteriorated. She's spiking a fever and her white blood cell count is elevated. We suspect infection from the surgery. How bad? Bad enough that we're moving her to intensive care. If the antibiotics don't work within the next few hours, the doctor's voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. Elena might not make it through the night. Dante was moving before conscious thought caught up, barking orders to Marco, grabbing his jacket, his mind a whirlwind of worst-case scenarios. All the planning, all the strategy, all the careful moves against Victor and the senator, none of it mattered if Elena died. The drive to St. Mary's was a blur. He might have run red lights, might have driven on sidewalks. Time collapsed into a single desperate need: get to her. The ICU was a controlled chaos of beeping machines and urgent voices. Doctors and nurses moved with practiced efficiency around Elena's bed, adjusting IVs, monitoring vitals, their faces masks of professional concern. Doctor, Petrov met Dante outside the room. The infection is aggressive. We're hitting it with broad-spectrum antibiotics, but her body's already weakened from the trauma. The next 6 hours are critical. Can I see her? She's unconscious. The fever's made her delirious, so we sedated her to keep her stable. I don't care. I need to see her. Something in Dante's voice must have conveyed the desperation he felt, because Dr. Petrov stepped aside without further argument. Elena looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, dwarfed by machines and monitors. Her skin was flushed with fever, her breathing rapid and shallow. An oxygen mask covered her face, and new IVs snaked into both arms, pumping medication into her system in a race against the infection, consuming her from within. Dante pulled a chair close to her bedside and took her hand carefully, mindful of the IV line. Her skin was burning hot. "You don't get to die," he said quietly, knowing she couldn't hear him but needing to say it anyway. "Not now. Not after making me believe in something better. Not after offering me redemption I don't deserve." Her hand twitched in his, a reflexive movement that meant nothing. "I'm going to fix this," he continued. "I'm going to destroy everyone who put you here. Victor, the senator, every person who thought your life was disposable. They're going to learn that hurting you was the worst mistake they ever made." The machines beeped their rhythmic warnings, marking time in seconds that felt like hours. "But I need you to fight. I need you to be as stubborn and fierce as you were when you demanded the truth from me. Remember that? Remember telling me you could decide what I deserved?" His voice roughened. "Decide to live, Elena. Choose to fight. And when you wake up, because you will wake up, I'll be here. I'll answer every question, tell you every truth, show you exactly who I am without the armor. Just please, please hold on." A hand touched his shoulder. Dr. Hayes, her expression sympathetic. "Mr. Salvatore, you should rest. This could take hours, and you won't do her any good if you collapse from exhaustion." "I'm not leaving her." "I didn't think you would." Dr. Hayes pulled up another chair. "Then I'll stay too. Someone should keep watch while the antibiotics work." They sat in silence, two people from completely different worlds united by care for the woman fighting for her life between them. Dante's phone buzzed repeatedly. Marco with updates on the warehouse situation, Tony with more intelligence on the senator, other lieutenants needing decisions only he could make. He ignored all of it. The empire could run itself for a few hours. Elena needed him here. Around 3 a.m., her fever broke. The change was gradual at first, her breathing evening out, the flush fading from her cheeks, her vital signs stabilizing on the monitors. Dr. Hayes checked her chart and allowed herself a small smile. "She's responding to the antibiotics. The infection's retreating." Relief hit Dante like a physical blow. "She's going to be okay?" "Too early to say definitively, but this is very encouraging. Her body's fighting back. That's a good sign." Dante sagged in his chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. He'd been awake for over 40 hours, running on nothing but coffee and adrenaline, but he couldn't sleep. Not yet. Not until he was certain Elena was out of danger. Dr. Hayes stood, patting his shoulder. "I'm going to update the team. Stay with her. Talk to her. Even unconscious, patients can sometimes hear familiar voices. It helps them find their way back." After she left, Dante leaned closer to Elena's bedside. "Did you hear that? You're fighting back, just like I knew you would." He stroked her hand gently with his thumb. "You're stronger than you know, Elena Romano. Stronger than me, stronger than this entire mess. And when you wake up, I'm going to make sure you never have to be this strong again. I'm going to keep you safe even if it destroys me." His phone buzzed again. This time, he looked. Marco. "Boss, we have a situation. Victor knows about the contractor you flipped. He just sent a message. The nurse dies or the war escalates." Dante's jaw tightened. Victor was calling his bluff, trying to force a choice between protecting Elena and protecting his empire. There was no choice. There never had been. "Call our people," he texted back. "Full mobilization. Every available man. We're ending this tonight." "Are you sure? This could get bloody. It already is. Time to finish it." He looked at Elena's peaceful face, memorizing every detail. When she woke up, and she would wake up, he wanted to tell her that the threat was eliminated, that she could go back to her life without shadows following her, that she was free, even if that freedom meant freedom from him. "I have to go," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "But I'll be back. I promise." In the hallway, he found Marco waiting with fresh clothes and weapons. "The men are gathering at the compound. We've got 40 ready to move, another 20 on standby. Enough to hit Victor's remaining safe houses simultaneously? And the Grand Stone Towers. We take out his operations and trap him in his penthouse. He'll have nowhere to run." "What about police response?" "Captain Reynolds is on Victor's payroll. He'll make sure units are delayed responding to the financial district. Gives us maybe 20 minutes before real backup arrives. 20 minutes to dismantle a Russian mob operation and capture one of the most dangerous men in the city. It should have been impossible." But Dante had spent 6 months protecting Elena from the shadows. He'd spent 24 hours dismantling threats to her life. He'd spent the last 3 hours watching her fight death itself. Impossible was just another word for Tuesday. "Let's go to war," he said. The compound's armory was a small room behind a false wall in the basement, filled with enough weapons to outfit a small army. Dante selected a Glock 19, reliable, accurate, comfortable in his hand from years of use. Marco and the other lieutenants armed themselves with military precision, checking magazines, loading chambers, strapping on tactical vests. "Remember," Dante addressed the assembled men, "this isn't about revenge. This is about sending a message. Anyone who threatens what's ours will be met with overwhelming force. We go in fast, we secure the locations, we extract Victor alive if possible, dead if necessary." "What about his men?" someone asked. "Give them one chance to surrender." After that, they made their choice. The team split into groups, 3 units of 12 men each, plus a command team that would hit the Grand Stone Towers with Dante leading personally. They moved out into the pre-dawn darkness like wraiths, black SUVs rolling through empty streets toward their targets. Dante rode in the lead vehicle, his mind focused with crystalline clarity. This was what he was good at. Not love, not redemption, not being the man Elena seemed to think he could become, but war, strategy, the cold calculation of violence. Marco sat beside him, checking his weapon one last time. "Boss, after tonight, assuming we survive, what's the plan with the senator?" "We expose him. Every dirty dollar, every Russian connection, every crime he's committed while pretending to be a public servant. Tony's documentation will ruin him politically and legally. And if he tries to use his connections to fight back, then we make sure his connections understand that protecting Kellerman means becoming targets themselves. Power is only useful when people fear the consequences of opposing you." "What about the girl? Elena, what are you going to tell her about all this?" Dante stared out the window at the city he'd conquered through blood and will. "The truth. All of it. And then I'm going to let her go." "You're just going to walk away?" "I'm going to give her the choice I never gave myself, the chance to choose light over darkness." His voice was soft. "She deserves better than me, Marco. Better than this world. And if loving her means letting her go, then that's what I'll do. That's either the most noble or the most stupid thing I've ever heard. Probably both." The Grand Stone Towers loomed ahead, a pillar of steel and glass that housed the wealthy and powerful. Victor's penthouse occupied the entire top floor, a fortress in the sky that should have been impregnable. Should have been. Dante had the building's security codes courtesy of a bribed maintenance worker, had blueprints showing every entrance and exit, had disabled the building's emergency systems remotely so no alarms would sound. They entered through the parking garage, moving in tactical formation toward the service elevator. Two of Victor's guards stood watch, but they never saw Dante's men coming. Silent takedowns, zip ties, gags. No shots fired, no alarms raised. The elevator rose with agonizing slowness, each floor ticking by like a countdown to violence. Dante checked his weapon one last time, his heart beating steady and slow. This was familiar territory. This was where he lived. The doors opened onto the penthouse foyer. More guards, 4 this time, armed with automatic weapons. They turned at the sound of the elevator, but Dante's team was faster. The firefight was brief and brutal. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness, the sound of gunfire deafening in the enclosed space. One of Victor's men went down, then another. The remaining 2 dove for cover behind expensive furniture, returning fire that chewed through drywall and shattered priceless artwork. Marco took out the 3rd guard with a precision shot that would have impressed a military sniper. Dante advanced on the 4th, putting 2 rounds center mass before the man could reload. Silence fell, broken only by ringing ears and harsh breathing. "Clear!" Marco called out. They moved deeper into the penthouse, clearing rooms one by one. Master bedroom, empty. Office, empty. Kitchen, empty. Then they found Victor in the main living room, standing by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. He held a phone in one hand and a gun in the other, his expression more annoyed than afraid. "Salvatore," he said calmly, "I was wondering when you'd make your move. Put down the weapon, Victor." "Or what? You kill me? That starts war you cannot win. Bratva has more soldiers, more resources. You are one man trying to hold empire against ocean. Put down the weapon." Victor smiled, a cold expression that held no humor. "You do this for her. The nurse. Such foolishness, starting war over woman who doesn't even know you. Last warning. She will never be safe. You know this, yes? I die. Another comes. Senator dies. Another politician takes his place. This is how world works. People like us, we don't get happy endings with innocent women. We get blood and betrayal until someone finally puts bullet in our heads." The words cut deeper than they should have, perhaps because they echoed Dante's own thoughts. "Maybe," Dante conceded, "but until that bullet finds me, I'm going to make sure Elena Romano gets to live the life she deserves, even if I'm not in it." Such nobility from mobster. "You think this makes you better than me?" "No, it makes me desperate. There's a difference." Victor's finger tightened on the trigger. "Desperate men are most dangerous." "Yes," Dante agreed. "They are." The shot came from Marco, not Dante. A clean hit to Victor's shoulder that spun the Russian around and sent his gun clattering across marble floors. Victor collapsed against the window, clutching his wound, his face twisted in pain and rage. "You shoot me in my own home," he snarled. "This is declaration of war." "No," Dante corrected, approaching slowly. "This is the end of one. Your operations in this city are finished, Victor. Your men are being rounded up as we speak. Your assets will be seized, and Senator Kellerman is about to become very interested in testifying against you to save himself. Kellerman is coward who will say nothing. We'll see." Dante pulled out his phone, dialing a number. It rang twice before a sleepy voice answered. "Senator Kellerman speaking." "Senator, this is Dante Salvatore. I wanted to let you know that Victor Sokolov has been neutralized. He's currently bleeding in his penthouse, and I'm sure he'll have very interesting things to tell federal investigators about your arrangement." Silence. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't. Just like you don't know about 12 million in offshore accounts, or meetings at the Olympia Hotel, or ordering the death of an innocent nurse because of your paranoia. You can't prove any of that." "Actually, I can. I have documentation, witness statements, and a very motivated Russian mobster who'll trade testimony for a reduced sentence. Your career is over, Kellerman. The only question is whether you go down alone or take your friends with you." "You're bluffing." "Am I? Check your email. The file I just sent contains enough evidence to put you in federal prison for 20 years. It's also been sent to 3 major newspapers and 2 television networks on a delayed timer. You have 12 hours to turn yourself in and cooperate with authorities. If you do, I'll cancel the public release. If you don't, Dante let the threat hang. This is extortion. This is justice. Elena Romano almost died because of your cowardice. You wanted her dead to protect secrets that weren't worth protecting. Now you're going to pay the price. He ended the call and looked at Victor, who'd managed to sit up despite his wound. You think you win? The Russian said. You think this ends anything? There will be consequences. Yes, I know. Dante crouched to Victor's eye level. But here's what you don't understand. I don't care about consequences anymore. I care about one thing, keeping Elena Romano alive and safe. Everything else, my empire, my reputation, my life, is negotiable. So when the Bratva sends someone to avenge you, when the Russians come looking for payback, I'll be ready. And I'll do it all over again if I have to. Understanding dawned in Victor's eyes. You are already dead, man. Just don't know it yet. Maybe, but Elena will live. That's enough. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Captain Reynolds' delay had bought them the time they needed, but now real cops, honest ones, were responding to reports of gunfire. Time to go, Marco said. They left Victor bleeding but alive for the police to find, evidence of his crimes scattered throughout the penthouse like breadcrumbs. By the time authorities sorted through it all, the connection between the Russian mob boss and Senator Kellerman would be impossible to ignore. Outside, Dante's phone buzzed with confirmations from his other teams. All 3 safe houses secured. Victor's remaining men captured or scattered. The war was over almost before it started. In the SUV racing away from the Grand Stone, Dante finally allowed himself to breathe. His hands were steady despite the adrenaline crash, his mind already moving to the next problem. Boss, Marco said quietly, that thing you said to Victor, about giving up everything for the girl, did you mean it? Dante watched the city blur past the windows, lights and shadows mixing into abstraction. Every word. That's... Marco trailed off, searching for words. I've known you 15 years. Never thought I'd see you like this. Like what? Human. The word settled between them like a benediction or an accusation. Dante wasn't sure which. His phone rang. Dr. Hayes. Mr. Salvatore, Elena's awake, and she's asking for you. Dawn was breaking over the city when Dante walked back into St. Mary's Hospital, his clothes still carrying the faint scent of gunpowder and smoke. He'd stopped only long enough to change his shirt and wash the evidence of violence from his hands, but there was no hiding what he'd done tonight. It lived in his eyes, in the set of his shoulders, in the way nurses instinctively stepped aside when he passed. Marco had wanted to come with him, but Dante had refused. This conversation, whatever it would be, needed to happen without bodyguards or lieutenants. Just him and Elena, finally honest with nothing left to hide behind. Dr. Hayes met him outside the ICU, her expression unreadable. She's stable. The fever's completely broken, and the infection is responding well to treatment. We're moving her back to a regular room this afternoon. How is she really? The doctor's face softened. Scared, confused, angry. She woke up asking questions I couldn't answer. Questions about why someone tried to access her room, about the police investigation being shut down, about you. She paused. I told her you'd been here all night, that you refused to leave even when I ordered you to rest. You didn't have to tell her that. Yes, I did. Because that girl in there needs to understand that whatever else you are, Mr. Salvatore, you care about her welfare more than your own. She needs to know that before you have whatever conversation is about to happen. Dante studied the older woman, seeing the wisdom in eyes that had witnessed countless bedside dramas. You know what I am, what I do. I know you run an organization that operates outside the law. I know people whisper your name with fear and respect in equal measure. I know that when you donated $10 million to build our pediatric wing, you did it anonymously, and when I found out and thanked you, you said it was for the children, not for recognition. Dr. Hayes' voice was firm. I also know that in 30 years of medicine, I've seen politicians, businessmen, and supposed pillars of the community who wouldn't cross the street to help a dying patient if it inconvenienced them. You're a complicated man, Mr. Salvatore, but you're not a monster. The words hit harder than they should have. Elena might disagree. Then convince her otherwise. But do it honestly. She deserves that much. Dante nodded and pushed through the door. Elena was sitting up in bed, looking impossibly fragile in a hospital gown that seemed designed to emphasize vulnerability. Her dark hair was tangled around her shoulders, her face pale but alert. And her eyes, those penetrating dark eyes that saw through every defense he'd ever built, tracked him from the doorway to her bedside with an intensity that made him want to confess sins he hadn't even committed yet. "You look like hell," she said, her voice rough from intubation but steady. "You look alive. I'll take the trade." "Doctor, Hayes said you were here all night, that you held my hand and talked to me even though I was unconscious." "She had no business telling you that." "What did you say to me?" Dante pulled the chair close to her bed, the same chair he'd occupied during the darkest hours of the night. "I told you not to die, that you needed to fight, that I was going to destroy everyone who put you here." "And did you?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications. "Yes," he said simply. "Viktor Sokolov is in custody. Senator Kellerman will be arrested by this afternoon. The people who wanted you dead are no longer in a position to threaten you." Elena's eyes widened. What did you do?" "What needed to be done. Victor's facing federal charges for racketeering, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The senator's career is over, and he'll likely spend the next 2 decades in prison. Their operation is dismantled, their associates scattered or arrested." "You did all that in one night?" "I've been building the case for days. Last night just brought everything to a head." She stared at him, emotions flickering across her face too quickly to catalog. "People died, didn't they? In this, whatever this was." Dante wouldn't lie to her. Not now. "Yes. 8 of my men were killed in the initial attacks on our warehouses. Several of Victor's people died in the raid on his safe houses. Violence has consequences, Elena. It always does." "And you're just okay with that? With people dying because of you?" "No." The word came out harsh. "I'm never okay with it. Every man who falls under my command, every casualty in this endless war for territory and power, they haunt me. But being haunted doesn't change the reality of the world I live in." "The world you chose to live in?" "Yes." Elena's hands twisted in the hospital sheets. "I can't wrap my head around this. 2 days ago, I was treating a kid with pneumonia. Now I'm in the middle of some mob war, people are dead, and you're sitting here like it's just another Tuesday." "It is just another Tuesday. That's the problem." "No, the problem is that you think this is normal." Her voice rose, making machines beep in protest. "People don't just go around starting wars and toppling criminals and whatever else you did last night." "You're right. Normal people don't. But I stopped being normal a long time ago." "When?" The question was almost a plea. "When did you decide that this was the life you wanted?" Dante leaned back, memories flooding in like dark water. "I was 8 years old. My father ran a small gambling operation, nothing major. He paid protection money to the Moretti family, kept his head down, tried to make an honest living in a dishonest business. Then one day he was short on his payment, just $500. The Morettis sent someone to collect, and when my father couldn't pay, they beat him to death in our kitchen while I watched from the hallway." Elena's hand moved to her mouth. "My mother died 6 months later. The official cause was heart failure, but I knew better. She died of grief and terror and the knowledge that her husband's killers walked free. I went into foster care, bounced around the system, learned that the world rewards strength and punishes weakness. By 15, I was running with a crew. By 20, I'd killed my first man, one of the Morettis who'd murdered my father." Dante's voice was flat, reciting facts without emotion. "By 25, I'd built my own organization. By 30, I'd absorbed or destroyed every rival operation in the city. I am what I am because the alternative was being a victim, and I swore on my father's grave that I'd never be helpless again." Silence filled the room, broken only by the steady beep of monitors. "I'm sorry," Elena said softly. "I'm sorry that happened to you. No child should witness that kind of violence. I'm not looking for sympathy." "I know. You're looking for understanding, maybe even permission to be the monster you think you are." Her eyes held his. "But here's what I don't understand, Dante. Somewhere between that 8-year-old boy And the man sitting in front of me, you had choices. You could have broken the cycle. You could have become something different. Could I? Or was I always going to end up here covered in blood and making apologies to a woman too good for me? That's a cop-out and you know it. You're not some helpless product of your circumstances. You made choices. Every day you choose violence over peace, power over redemption, fear over... She stopped herself. Over what? Over anything better. Dante laughed, the sound bitter. You think I had better options? The system that was supposed to protect me after my father died abandoned me. Social services, police, all the legitimate authorities, they did nothing while I starved and suffered. The only people who gave a damn were criminals. They fed me, housed me, taught me how to survive. Should I have been grateful to the institutions that failed me and rejected the only people who helped? That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying, Elena? That I should have pulled myself up by my bootstraps and become a productive citizen? Gone to college on a scholarship I'd never get with my record? Found honest work that pays minimum wage while the people who killed my father lived in mansions? The world you're describing doesn't exist for people like me. It never did. So you became the same thing that destroyed your family. The words hit like a physical blow. Dante felt something crack in his chest, a pain sharper than any bullet wound. Yes, he said quietly. I became exactly what I hated, and I live with that knowledge every single day. Elena's anger seemed to deflate, replaced by something that looked like sadness. I don't know what to do with this, with you. Part of me wants to call security and have you arrested for everything you just confessed. Part of me wants to scream at you for being so casually destructive. And part of me... Her voice broke. Part of you what? Part of me wants to believe you're more than the sum of your crimes. That the man who held my hand through a fever, who donated millions to help sick children, who looked at me like I was something precious, that version of you is real. What if they're both real? What if I'm capable of tenderness and brutality in equal measure? Then you're the most dangerous person I've ever met. Elena's eyes glistened. Because I could fall for the gentle parts and forget about the monster underneath until it's too late. You're not falling for me. Don't tell me what I'm feeling. Her voice was sharp. You don't get to decide that. I get to decide if I'm attracted to you, if I care about you, if I'm terrified of you, all of it. That's my choice. And what do you choose? Elena was quiet for a long moment, her gaze searching his face like she was looking for answers written in his features. I don't know yet. Ask me again when I'm not recovering from being shot and nearly dying from infection. Despite everything, Dante felt his lips twitch. Fair enough. But I need to know something first. She leaned forward slightly, wincing at the pull on her stitches. This protection you're offering, is it because you care about me specifically, or because I'm some kind of project? Some innocent thing you can save to balance out all the darkness in your life? It started as the second thing, he admitted. When I first noticed you with Luca, you were this beacon of goodness in a world that usually only shows me ugliness. I thought if I could keep that light burning, even from a distance, maybe it would prove that not everything I touch turns to ash. And now? Now it's the first thing. Somewhere in the last few days, you stopped being an abstract symbol and became the only person I think about when I wake up. The only voice I want to hear. The only future I can imagine wanting. Dante's voice dropped. And that terrifies me more than any Russian mobster or corrupt senator ever could. Why does it terrify you? Because I don't know how to do this. I know how to plan operations, eliminate threats, build empires. But caring about someone being vulnerable, that's not in my skill set. And I'm afraid that when you see all of me, not just the parts I can control, but the broken, violent pieces I keep hidden, you'll realize I'm not worth the risk. Elena reached out slowly, her hand trembling slightly from weakness. She touched his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw. You really don't see it, do you? See what? That you've already shown me the broken parts. The violence, the empire built on blood, the darkness you carry. I know what you are, Dante. And I'm still here asking questions, trying to understand. If I was going to run, I would have done it already. You're in a hospital bed. Running isn't exactly an option. Stop deflecting. Her thumb traced his cheekbone. I see you, the real you. The man who avenges wrongs and protects people. The man who pays for a stranger's daughter's surgery because she's sick. The man who sat by my bed all night and begged me to live. That's not a monster. That's someone desperately trying to be better than his circumstances. Elena, let me finish. I'm not saying I approve of your methods. I'm not saying the violence is justified. But I'm also not naive enough to think the world is black and white. You've done terrible things for what you believe are necessary reasons. That doesn't make you evil. It makes you complicated. Complicated is a generous interpretation. Maybe, or maybe I just see potential that you've convinced yourself doesn't exist. She pulled her hand back, suddenly self-conscious. But I need time, Dante. Time to process everything, to figure out what I want, to decide if I can live with the reality of who you are versus the fantasy of who you could be. That's fair. Is it? Because I get the feeling that you're used to getting what you want when you want it. Waiting isn't exactly your strong suit. Dante smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. No, but for you, I'd wait forever. Don't make promises you can't keep. I don't. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Then Elena's eyes grew heavy, exhaustion from her ordeal catching up with her. You should rest, Dante said, standing. I'll have my men keep watch, but at a distance. You won't see them unless you need them. What about you? Where will you be? Cleaning up the mess from last night, making sure Victor's organization stays dismantled, ensuring the senator's prosecution moves forward. The usual. The usual, Elena repeated, shaking her head. Your life is insane. Yes, but it's kept you alive. Don't use me as justification for what you do. I won't be your redemption project. You're not. You're just you. And that's enough. He moved toward the door, but her voice stopped him. Dante, thank you for everything, even the parts I don't understand yet. Get some rest, Elena. We'll talk more when you're stronger. Outside her room, Marco was waiting with a tablet full of reports. Boss, we've got cleanup to handle. The feds are asking questions about last night, and we need to coordinate stories. Handle it. I trust your judgment. Marco's eyebrows rose. You're delegating? That's new. I'm exhausted, Marco. Even I have limits. Could have fooled me. You've been awake for what, 50 hours? Closer to 60. But who's counting? They walked through the hospital corridors, Dante's mind already shifting to the practical matters of maintaining his empire while half dead from fatigue. The empire didn't sleep just because he needed to. There were shipments to coordinate, territories to secure, alliances to maintain. But for the first time in his adult life, the empire felt like a burden rather than a purpose. His phone rang. Tony, sounding smugly satisfied. Boss, you're going to want to see this. Senator Kellerman just held a press conference. He's resigning from office effective immediately and cooperating with federal investigators. Says he wants to atone for grave errors in judgment. Translation: he's trying to cut a deal before we release the evidence publicly. Exactly. But here's the best part. He's implicating other politicians who were involved with the Russians. This is going to be a huge scandal. We're talking multiple arrests, maybe even a few congressmen going down. Dante felt a grim satisfaction. Make sure our documentation supports whatever he tells the feds. I want an airtight case that doesn't blow back on us. Already on it. Also, Victor's lawyer's making noise about police brutality and illegal search and seizure. Let him make noise. We have recordings of Victor ordering hits, financial records showing his criminal enterprise, and testimony from the contractor he hired to kill Elena. His lawyer can scream all he wants. The evidence speaks for itself. What about our exposure? The warehouse raids, the firefight at the Grandstone? We left a lot of footprints last night. Captain Reynolds is handling the police reports. As far as official records show, we were defending our legitimate businesses from Russian aggression. Self-defense all the way. And the bodies? What bodies? You mean the Russian operatives who died during their illegal raids on our property? Tragic, really. Perhaps they should have considered the consequences before attacking. Tony laughed. You make murder sound so reasonable when you put it that way. That's why I'm the boss and you're the intelligence guy. Different skill sets. After ending the call, Dante allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The threat to Elena was neutralized. The senator would face justice. Victor's organization was crippled beyond recovery, and his own empire remained intact, stronger even for having weathered the storm. But the victory felt hollow, because ultimately, none of it mattered if Elena decided she couldn't live with who he was. Boss? Marco's voice cut through his thoughts. There's something else. The Russian contractor, the one you paid to have his daughter's surgery, his kid's in pre-op now. Dr. Brennan says the procedure should go smoothly. Good. Make sure the family has everything they need. You went soft on him. Could have used him to send a message to the Bratva. I sent a different message, that not everyone in our world is irredeemable, that sometimes mercy is stronger than murder. That's very philosophical for a crime boss. Blame Elena. She's making me think about things I've avoided for years. Like? Like whether any of this matters. The empire, the power, the control. What's the point if I can't share it with someone who makes me want to be better? Marco was quiet for a moment. You know, she might never accept this life. She might decide you're too dangerous, too complicated, too everything. I know. And you're okay with that? No. But I'll respect it. Because loving someone means wanting what's best for them, even if that best doesn't include you. When did you become such a romantic? Probably around the time I realized I'd burned down the world to keep one nurse safe. They reached Dante's car, an armored sedan that could withstand small arms fire and had more security features than most military vehicles. Marco climbed in beside him, tablet still in hand. What's the plan now, boss? We've got Victor contained, the senators neutralized. Elena's safe. What's the next move? Dante stared out at the city, his city, the kingdom he'd built from blood and ambition. We consolidate, shore up our defenses, replace the warehouses we lost, make sure every remaining rival understands that coming at us has consequences. And after that? After that, I figure out how to be the man Elena thinks I could be, or I accept that I can't be, and I let her go. That's not much of a plan. No, but it's honest. The drive back to the compound was quiet, each man lost in his own thoughts. By the time they arrived, the sun was fully up, painting the sky in shades of gold that seemed almost obscene after the violence of the previous night. Dante's bedroom was a Spartan space despite the compound's luxury. A bed, a dresser, a single chair. No decorations, no personal touches. He'd lived here for 10 years, and it still looked like a hotel room. He collapsed onto the bed without bothering to undress, exhaustion finally claiming him. His last thought before sleep dragged him under was of Elena's hand on his face, her voice telling him she saw him. He woke 6 hours later to his phone ringing insistently. Dr. Hayes. Mr. Salvatore, I thought you'd want to know. We're discharging Elena tomorrow. Her recovery is remarkable, but she needs somewhere safe to continue healing. Dante was already sitting up, his mind sharp despite too little sleep. I have a place. Private, secure, full medical facilities. She'll have round-the-clock care. She mentioned wanting to go back to her apartment. Her apartment is where she was shot. It's not secure. That's what I told her. She wasn't pleased. Let me talk to her. She specifically said she didn't want to talk to you about this. Said you'd try to override her decision with logic and protection and that intimidating thing you do with your voice. Despite himself, Dante smiled. She's learning. Mr. Salvatore, I'm going to be blunt. That girl cares about you, whether she wants to admit it or not, but she's also fiercely independent and doesn't respond well to being managed. If you want any kind of relationship with her, professional, personal, or otherwise, you need to give her agency in her own life. Even if that agency puts her in danger? Even then. Because the alternative is making her a prisoner, and that's not protection, that's control. The words stung because they were true. What do you suggest? Ask her what she wants. Really ask without agenda or manipulation. Then respect her answer even if it's not what you want to hear. And if her answer is to go back to an apartment that was clearly compromised, then you find a compromise. Increase security at her building, install better locks. Have your men patrol the area, but let her make the choice. Dante ran a hand through his hair, frustration warring with understanding. This is harder than dismantling a criminal organization. Welcome to relationships, Mr. Salvatore. They're rarely simple. After hanging up, Dante spent 20 minutes pacing his room, thinking through options. He could override Elena's wishes, move her to his secure facility whether she agreed or not, keep her safe through force if necessary, but that would make him exactly what she feared, a man who controlled rather than protected, a man who saw her as a possession rather than a person. He called Marco. "I need you to secure Elena's apartment building. Full sweep for bugs or surveillance, upgrade all locks and security systems, station 2 men in the lobby, 24/7. Make it look like building-wide improvements, not special treatment for one tenant." "You're letting her go back there?" "I'm giving her the choice. There's a difference. And if she chooses to leave your protection entirely," Dante was quiet for a moment, "then I respect that choice and protect her from the shadows, like I did before all this started. You know that's going to kill you, right? Being close enough to help but too far away to really be part of her life?" "Yes, but it's not about what I want anymore. It's about what she needs. Since when did you become this selfless?" "Since I met someone worth being selfless for." The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. Dante coordinated security upgrades for Elena's building while simultaneously managing the fallout from Victor's arrest. The Russians' organization was collapsing without his leadership, various lieutenants fighting amongst themselves for control. Dante made sure none of them succeeded, quietly absorbing the most valuable assets while law enforcement dismantled the rest. Senator Kellerman's resignation had triggered exactly the scandal Tony predicted. 3 other politicians had been implicated, 2 had already resigned, and federal prosecutors were building cases that would take years to fully resolve. Dante's organization remained untouched, the documentation he'd provided carefully scrubbed of anything that might expose his own criminal activities. By the time Elena was discharged from the hospital, everything was in place. Her apartment building had state-of-the-art security that looked like standard improvements. Her specific apartment had reinforced locks, bulletproof windows, and a panic button that would alert Dante's men instantly. The neighborhood was now patrolled regularly by both police, whom Dante had encouraged through anonymous donations to their widows and orphans fund, and his own people in unmarked vehicles. She would be as safe as he could make her without physically imprisoning her. Dr. Hayes called him when Elena was ready to leave. "She asked me to tell you that she doesn't need an escort home, that she's called a rideshare. Tell her that's fine, but tell her also that if she changes her mind about anything, security, protection, just wanting to talk, she has my number. I'll pass that along." Dante waited in his compound, watching security feeds that showed Elena leaving the hospital with Dr. Hayes, climbing into a rideshare, disappearing into the city. Every instinct screamed at him to follow, to ensure her safety personally, to not let her out of his sight. But he remained in his chair, hands clenched on the armrests, forcing himself to give her space. His phone buzzed an hour later. A text from an unknown number. "I'm home." The new locks are ridiculous, by the way. Nobody needs this level of security unless they're the president or you. Dante felt tension he didn't know he'd been carrying release from his shoulders. She was texting him. That was something. He typed back, "Consider it a building upgrade, safer for everyone." Her response came quickly. "You're a terrible liar, but thank you for everything, even the overprotective security theater, not theater, practical precautions. You know what's practical? Normal locks and maybe a doorbell camera. You installed enough security to withstand a siege. Old habits." A pause. Then, "I meant what I said at the hospital. I need time to figure this out. What you are, what we could be, whether I'm crazy for even considering it. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." Another pause, longer this time. "Dante? Why me? Of all the people in this city, why do you care about a pediatric nurse you barely know?" Dante stared at the question, considering how to answer. The truth was complicated, layered with psychology and history, and wounds he'd never fully acknowledged. But Elena had asked for honesty, and she deserved it. He typed carefully, "Because when I look at you, I remember what goodness looks like. Because you treat broken children with tenderness I've never experienced myself. Because you make me want to be someone worthy of that kindness. Because in 34 years of living in darkness, you're the first light I've wanted more than power." The response took several minutes. "That's either the most beautiful or the most terrifying thing anyone's ever said to me. Probably both. Definitely both." I'm going to rest now. Doctor's orders. But Dante, don't disappear. I may need time, but I need to know you're still there when I'm ready. I'll be here. Always. He set down the phone and allowed himself to hope. It was a dangerous emotion for a man in his position. Hope. It made you vulnerable, gave your enemies leverage, created weaknesses that could be exploited. But as he sat in his fortress, protected by walls and weapons and the fear his name inspired, Dante realized that he was already vulnerable. Had been since the moment Elena Romano had smiled at his nephew and shown him what compassion looked like. She'd already breached his defenses without even trying. The question now was whether he'd let her all the way in or keep her at arm's length where she'd be safe from the darkness he carried. Marco found him hours later, still sitting in the same chair, staring at nothing. Boss, we need decisions on the Eastern Territory. The vacuum Victor left is causing problems. Handle it. You know what to do. You trust me to make those calls? I trust you to run this empire better than I can right now. My head's not in it, Marco. And a distracted leader gets people killed. What are you saying? Dante looked at his second-in-command, this man who'd been beside him through a decade of wars and deals and the slow climb to power. I'm saying that maybe it's time to start transitioning. You've earned the right to lead. You're smarter than me, more patient, less likely to start wars over nurses. You're stepping down? I'm stepping back. There's a difference. I'll still be involved, still make the big decisions. But the day-to-day operations, the territory management, the alliance building, that's yours now if you want it. Marco sat down heavily. Why? Because of her? Because of me. Because I've spent 26 years building something I'm not sure I want anymore. Because 8 men died last week because I chose to protect one woman. And while I don't regret that choice, I can't keep making decisions that value individual lives over organizational stability. That's called being human, boss. Caring about people. It's called being a liability. Leaders can't afford to have weak spots. And Elena is mine. So you're going to give up everything you've built? No. I'm going to build something different. Something that doesn't require me to sacrifice every decent impulse in the name of power. Dante stood, stretching muscles stiff from sitting too long. Start preparing for the transition. Quiet, gradual, nothing that signals weakness to our rivals. In 6 months, you'll be running daily operations. In a year, you'll be the boss in everything but name. And what will you be? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. 3 weeks passed in a strange dance of proximity and distance. Elena returned to work at St. Mary's on light duty, treating patients with the same gentle competence that had first captured Dante's attention. He watched from afar through security reports and occasional glimpses when he visited the hospital on legitimate business, always careful to maintain the space she'd requested. They texted. Short messages at first, then longer conversations that stretched into the early morning hours. She'd tell him about difficult cases or funny moments with young patients. He'd share carefully edited stories about his day, leaving out the violence but keeping the truth of who he was. It was the strangest courtship he'd never intended to have. Marco was managing the transition smoothly, taking on more authority with each passing day. The empire ran without Dante's constant oversight, which was both liberating and terrifying. He'd built his entire identity on being indispensable, the center around which everything revolved. Learning to step back felt like learning to breathe underwater. On a Thursday evening, his phone rang with Elena's actual voice instead of a text. "I want to see you," she said without preamble. "In person, not texting, not through security cameras you think I don't know about." Dante's heart did something complicated. "When?" "Tomorrow night. There's a coffee shop near my apartment, Giovanni's. Meet me there at 7. I'll be there." "And Dante?" "Come alone. No bodyguards lurking in corners. No security detail watching from cars. Just you." "Elena, that's not safe." "For you or for me?" Her voice held challenge and amusement in equal measure. "Because I'm pretty sure the most dangerous thing in that coffee shop will be you." "Fair point. 7 o'clock. Don't be late." She hung up before he could respond, leaving him staring at his phone with something that felt dangerously close to excitement. Marco found him the next evening agonizing over his wardrobe like a teenager before prom. "Boss, you're meeting her for coffee, not negotiating a peace treaty. Just wear what you normally wear. My normal clothes say crime boss. I need to say man you could potentially date without fearing for your life. Those aren't really different things in your case. Dante glared at him, not helping. Fine. Wear the charcoal sweater and dark jeans. Looks expensive but approachable. And for the love of all that's holy, don't bring a weapon. I always carry... Not tonight you don't. You're trying to convince her you can be normal. Walking into a coffee shop armed isn't normal. Dante felt naked leaving the compound without his Glock, but Marco was right. This wasn't a business meeting or a negotiation. This was him trying to be the man Elena thought he could become. Giovanni's was a small Italian cafe with warm lighting and the rich aroma of espresso. Dante arrived 10 minutes early out of habit, scanning the space with eyes trained to spot threats. But the only danger here was the possibility of rejection, which terrified him more than any armed assailant. Elena walked in at exactly 7 o'clock, and Dante's breath caught. She wore a simple green dress that brought out the warmth in her olive skin, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. The scar from her gunshot wound was hidden beneath fabric, but he could see the slight stiffness in her movement, a reminder of how close he'd come to losing her. "You came alone," she observed, sliding into the chair across from him. "You asked me to." "And you do everything I ask?" "When it comes to you, yes." She smiled, something genuine and warm that made his chest tight. That's a dangerous amount of power to give someone. You've had that power since the moment you smiled at my nephew and made him feel safe. I just didn't realize it until recently. A barista appeared and Elena ordered a cappuccino while Dante requested an espresso. When they were alone again, she studied him with those penetrating dark eyes. "You look different," she said. "Less armored." "I'm terrified. Terror strips away pretense." "What are you terrified of?" "That you'll look at me and see only the monster, that I'll say the wrong thing and you'll walk away, that I'm too broken to deserve the kindness you're offering." He paused. "That you'll give me a chance and I'll somehow destroy the best thing that's ever happened to me." Elena reached across the table, her hand covering his. "I spent 3 weeks thinking about this. About you. About whether I'm crazy for even considering a relationship with someone who runs a criminal empire." "And what did you conclude?" "That I probably am crazy, but also that I've seen you at your worst, violent, dangerous, willing to start wars. And I've also seen you at what might be your best, protective, generous, desperately trying to be worthy of something you think you don't deserve." She squeezed his hand. "You're not a good man, Dante. But I don't think you're an evil one either. You're complicated and damaged and trying. And maybe that's enough. Maybe isn't certainty. No, it's not. But certainty is overrated. I'm a trauma nurse. I deal with uncertainty every day. Lives hanging in the balance, impossible choices, outcomes I can't control. This feels familiar, actually. Comparing me to medical trauma. That's romantic." She laughed, the sound bright and unexpected. "I'm not great at romance. My last relationship ended because he couldn't handle my work schedule. The one before that fell apart when he realized I made more money than him. I date disasters, apparently. I'm definitely a disaster. Yes, but at least you're an honest one. You haven't lied to me about who you are or what you do. That's refreshing, in a terrifying sort of way." Their coffee arrived, giving Dante a moment to process. She was giving him a chance, an actual, real chance at something he'd never dared to want. "I need you to understand something," he said carefully. "I'm trying to step back from the day-to-day operations, transition more authority to Marco, but I can't completely walk away from that world. It's not safe for my people, and frankly, I don't know who I am without it. I'm not asking you to abandon everything. I'm asking you to make different choices going forward. Less violence, more legitimate business. Protect people without destroying others. That's not always possible in my world. Then change your world." Her voice was firm. "You have resources, connections, power. Use them differently. Fund programs that help kids who might otherwise end up like you did. Create opportunities instead of exploiting desperation. Be the man who breaks cycles instead of perpetuating them." Dante stared at her, something shifting in his chest. "You're asking me to become a completely different person." "No. I'm asking you to become the person you could have been if circumstances were different, the person I think you want to be. And if I can't, if I try and fail, then we'll deal with that when it happens. But Dante, you took down a Russian mob operation and a corrupt senator in less than a week. If you put half that energy into building something good instead of destroying things, imagine what you could accomplish. The idea was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. He'd spent so long defining himself by what he could take, what he could control, what he could destroy. The thought of building something positive, something that helped rather than hurt, it felt foreign and impossible and necessary. I don't know how to do that, he admitted. Then we'll figure it out together, if you want to, that is. Together, he repeated, testing the word. You're saying you want to try this? Actually try? I'm saying I want to see who we could be if we both made different choices. You stepping back from violence, me taking a risk on someone complicated. No guarantees, no promises of forever, just honest effort. Dante lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I will try. Every day, I will try to be worthy of this chance. Don't try to be worthy. Just try to be better. That's all any of us can do. They stayed in that coffee shop for 3 hours, talking about everything and nothing. Elena told him about her childhood in a small town upstate, her decision to become a nurse, the patients who'd broken her heart and the ones who'd healed it. Dante shared edited versions of his life, enough truth to be honest, but carefully avoiding the darkest details. When they finally left, the city night was cool and clear. Dante walked Elena back to her apartment, hyper-aware of the distance between them, the electric possibility of touch. At her door, she turned to face him. I have one rule, one non-negotiable boundary. Name it. You don't lie to me, ever. I can handle ugly truths. I can't handle deception. If you need to do something I won't like, you tell me. If someone threatens you or me or us, you tell me. No protecting me with lies. Agreed. But you have to promise the same. If this gets too heavy, if you're scared or regretting this, you tell me. Don't stay out of pity or some misguided desire to save me. Deal. She stood on her toes and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. Good night, Dante. Good night, Elena. He waited until she was safely inside before walking away, feeling lighter than he had in years. The next months were a study in transformation. Dante began systematically legitimizing his business operations, converting illegal revenue streams into legal enterprises. The gambling became licensed casinos. The protection rackets became private security firms. The money laundering evolved into real estate investment and venture capital. It wasn't perfect. Some operations couldn't be made legal, and he made the hard choice to shut them down rather than continue profiting from activities that could hurt Elena if exposed. Marco managed the transitions with characteristic efficiency, though he questioned some of Dante's decisions. Boss, you're leaving millions on the table, Marco said, reviewing quarterly reports. The drug distribution alone was 30% of our revenue. And it's also the thing most likely to get federal attention. We're out of that business entirely. Find another revenue stream or cut costs. This is about her, isn't it? The nurse. Her name is Elena. And yes, it's about her. It's also about not wanting to wake up when I'm 50 and realize I spent my entire life hurting people for profit. Marco studied him for a long moment. You're serious about changing. Completely. I've already set up meetings with community organizations about funding youth programs, job training, education, mentorship for kids in situations like I was in. If I can keep even one 8-year-old from watching his father die and choosing my path, it's worth it. The guys are going to think you've gone soft. Then they can leave. I'm building something different now. People who can't adapt don't belong here. To Dante's surprise, most of his organization embraced the changes. Some left for more violent crews, but the majority stayed, seemingly relieved to transition toward legitimate operations. Turned out a lot of criminals would prefer honest work if it paid well and didn't risk prison. His relationship with Elena developed slowly, carefully, like two people learning a new language. They had dinner twice a week. She introduced him to her colleagues from the hospital, who treated him with cautious politeness. He introduced her to Marco and a few trusted lieutenants, who treated her with reverence that made her uncomfortable. They look at me like I'm some kind of saint, she complained after one dinner. I'm just a person. To them, you're the woman who's changing their boss, making him better. That's pretty close to sainthood in our world. I'm not changing you, you're changing yourself. Because of you, there's a difference. 3 months into their relationship, Dante took her to the cemetery where his parents were buried. It was a quiet place on the outskirts of the city, well-maintained but sparsely visited. He stood before 2 simple headstones, Elena's hand warm in his. I never visit, he admitted. Felt like I'd dishonored their memory by becoming exactly what killed my father. Seemed hypocritical to come here and pretend I was their son instead of just another criminal. You are their son. The choices you made don't erase that. I'm not sure they'd agree. Elena was quiet for a moment, reading the headstones. Then she spoke softly. Your father ran a gambling operation. Your mother stayed with him despite the danger. They weren't perfect either, Dante. They were people trying to survive in difficult circumstances, making the best choices they could, just like you. I've killed people, Elena, done things that would horrify them. Probably. But you've also saved people, protected people. You paid for a stranger's daughter to have life-saving surgery. You're funding programs to help at-risk youth. You're trying to be better. She squeezed his hand. I think they'd be proud of that. Not everything you've done, but the fact that you're trying to change. Dante felt something break loose in his chest, a grief he'd carried for 26 years without acknowledging. He pulled Elena close, burying his face in her hair, and let himself feel the loss he'd been running from since he was 8 years old. She held him while he broke, her strength supporting him when his own failed. When he finally pulled back, her eyes were wet too. Sorry, he said roughly. I didn't mean to. Stop apologizing for being human. It's one of your better qualities. They stood there for a while longer, Dante silently promising his parents that he'd keep trying, keep changing, keep becoming someone who honored their memory instead of disgracing it. 6 months after their first coffee shop meeting, Senator Kellerman was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. Viktor Sokolov received 25 to life. 3 other politicians resigned in disgrace. The scandal was national news for weeks, and Dante's name never appeared in any of the coverage. He and Elena watched the sentencing on television from his compound, her head on his shoulder. It's really over, she said. The people who wanted me dead are in prison. Yes. And you made that happen without killing anyone. At least not anyone who didn't attack first. Progress, right? Definite progress. She tilted her head to look at him. I'm proud of you, for how you handled this, for the changes you're making, for being willing to become someone different. I'm not different, I'm just trying to be better at being me. That's what different means. She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Dante responded carefully, always aware of how fragile this thing between them was, how easily he could destroy it with too much intensity or too little control. But Elena wasn't fragile. She kissed him back with confidence, her hands sliding into his hair, her body pressing close. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she smiled. I love you, she said simply. I've been trying not to, trying to be sensible and careful, but I love you anyway. The real you, the complicated you, the you who's trying so hard to be worthy of something you've always deserved. Dante felt like he'd been struck by lightning. You love me. I do. Despite my better judgment and the protests of several friends who think I'm insane, I love you. I love you too. The words came easier than they should have. I've loved you since you held my hand in that hospital and told me I got to decide what I deserved. Maybe even before that. Maybe from the moment I watched you save Luca and saw what real goodness looks like. We're really doing this, aren't we? Making this real? If you'll have me. All of me. Including the broken parts in the past I can't change. I'll have you. I'll have, on one condition. Anything. We get to build something together, not just you changing for me, but both of us creating a life that's ours. Different from what either of us imagined, but good. Real. I can do that. Elena smiled, that brilliant, genuine smile that had first captured his attention. Then we have a deal, Mr. Salvatore. The next year was transformation and growth. Dante's youth programs launched in 3 low-income neighborhoods, offering job training, education support, and mentorship. Elena volunteered as a medical advisor, teaching basic first aid and health literacy to teenagers who'd never had access to that information. The Salvatore Foundation became a legitimate philanthropic organization, funding everything from hospital equipment to college scholarships. Dante poured money and energy into building the city up instead of controlling it through fear. His criminal empire didn't disappear. Some activities were too entrenched, too profitable, too connected to loyal people's livelihoods. But it transformed. The violence stopped. The exploitation ended. What remained was a network of legitimate businesses and semi-legal operations that existed in the gray areas every major city had. Marco proved to be an excellent administrator, managing operations with steady competence while Dante focused on the bigger picture. The transition worked because both men wanted it to, because loyalty could evolve without breaking. 18 months after that first coffee shop meeting, Dante took Elena to the rooftop of his compound, where he'd arranged a private dinner under the stars. The city sparkled below them, lights and life and endless possibility. "I have something to ask you," he said, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been since before he learned to fight back. "And I need you to know that you can say no. That saying no won't change how I feel or what we're building together." Elena's eyes sparkled with knowing amusement. "Dante, are you about to propose?" "I'm about to try. I've never done this before, so I might be terrible at it." "You're already terrible at it, but continue." He pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a ring. Simple, elegant, a single diamond set in platinum. "Elena Romano, you saved my nephew's life and then somehow saved mine. You looked at a monster and saw a man. You gave me hope when I thought I was beyond redemption. You make me want to be better every single day." "Dante, let me finish. I know I'm not the safe choice. I know my past is dark and my present is complicated. I know that loving me means accepting parts of me that will always exist in shadows. But I swear to you, I will spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of your love. I will build things instead of destroying them. I will be the man you saw in me when I couldn't see it myself." He dropped to one knee, the city as his witness. "Will you marry me? Will you build this impossible, messy, beautiful life with me?" Elena's eyes were bright with tears, but she was smiling. "You forgot the most important part." "What part?" "The part where you ask if I love you enough to say yes." "Do you?" "I love you enough to say yes to everything. The beautiful parts, and the messy parts, and the impossible parts." She held out her hand. "Yes, Dante Salvatore, I'll marry you. I'll build this life with you. I'll take every risk and face every challenge because you're worth it." He slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning. She kissed him back with equal fervor, both of them laughing and crying and holding each other against the backdrop of the city they'd both chosen in different ways. When they finally broke apart, Elena touched his face gently. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" "Better than okay? We're going to be extraordinary. Even with your complicated past and my stubborn independence and all the reasons this shouldn't work? Especially because of those things. We're not a fairy tale, Elena. We're something better. We're real." The wedding was small, intimate, just close friends and family. Marco stood as Dante's best man, looking almost comfortable in a tuxedo. Dr. Hayes walked Elena down the aisle, having become a surrogate mother figure over the past 2 years. Luca, now 10 years old and thriving, served as ring-bearer with solemn dignity. Standing at the altar, watching Elena walk toward him in a simple white dress that took his breath away, Dante felt something he'd never experienced before. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of something worth fighting for. Something worth changing for. Something worth being better for. The priest asked if he took Elena to be his wife, in sickness and health, for better or worse, until death parted them. "I do," Dante said, his voice steady and sure. "I absolutely do." When Elena said the same words, he felt the last piece of his armor fall away. She'd seen him at his worst and his best, had chosen him anyway, had believed in his capacity for change when he didn't believe in it himself. They exchanged rings and promises, sealing their future with a kiss that felt like coming home. The reception was held at the compound, transformed from a fortress into something warm and welcoming. There was music and dancing and toasts that made both bride and groom laugh and cry in equal measure. Marco cornered Dante at one point, pulling him aside with unusual seriousness. "I need you to know something, boss. The organization, we're proud of what you've built. Not just the empire, but what it's becoming. You showed us that we don't have to be what circumstances made us, that we can choose differently." "Marco, let me finish. 15 years ago, you pulled me out of a gang war and gave me purpose. You made me your second because you saw potential I didn't know I had. Now you're doing the same thing for hundreds of kids through the foundation. You're breaking cycles, building futures." Marco's voice roughened. "You're the best man I've ever known, and I'm not just saying that because you're the groom." Dante pulled his oldest friend into an embrace. "None of this works without you. You know that, right? You're not just my second in command. You're my brother." "Brothers," Marco agreed. "Always." Later that night, when the guests had departed and the compound was quiet, Dante and Elena stood on the same rooftop where he'd proposed. She was still in her wedding dress, her hair starting to escape its careful arrangement, looking tired and happy and perfect. "What are you thinking?" she asked, leaning against him. "I'm thinking about 8-year-old me, watching my father die and swearing I'd never be helpless again. About all the choices I made from that place of fear and anger. About how certain I was that people like me didn't get happy endings. And now? Now I'm married to the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. I'm building something that helps instead of hurts. I have family and purpose and a future I actually want to live to see." He turned to face her fully. "Now I'm thinking that maybe I was wrong. Maybe we all get to choose our endings. And I choose this. You, us. Every complicated, messy, beautiful part of it." Elena smiled, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. "Good choice. The best one I ever made." They stood there together, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds, building a life that shouldn't work but did. The city sprawled below them, full of darkness and light, danger and possibility, all the contradictions that made it home. Dante had spent most of his life fighting poverty, fighting enemies, fighting his own worst instincts. But standing here with Elena, he realized he'd finally found something worth laying down his weapons for. Not surrender, evolution. He was still Dante Salvatore, still carried the scars of his past and the weight of his choices. But he was also Elena's husband now, a philanthropist, a man actively choosing to build instead of destroy. He wasn't perfect, would never be perfect, would always carry shadows that couldn't be fully erased. But he was trying. Every day, he was trying. And with Elena beside him, that was enough. "Ready to start our life together, Mrs. Salvatore?" he asked. She squeezed his hand, her ring catching the starlight. "I've been ready since the moment I decided you were worth the risk. Let's go build something extraordinary." And they did. Years later, when people asked how a pediatric nurse and a reformed crime boss had made a marriage work, Elena would smile and say simply, "We chose each other. Every day we keep choosing each other. That's all love really is, the daily decision to try." Dante would add, "She saw who I could be when I only saw who I'd been. She gave me permission to change when I thought change was impossible. She saved my life in every way a person can be saved." They built a life together that honored both their pasts while creating something entirely new. The Salvatore Foundation grew into one of the city's most effective charitable organizations. Dante's business empire evolved into legitimate enterprises that employed thousands. Elena continued her nursing work, eventually becoming the head of St. Mary's pediatric department. They had their struggles, moments when Dante's past threatened their present, times when the violence he'd left behind tried to pull him back, occasions when Elena questioned whether she'd made the right choice. But they weathered every storm together, two complicated people committed to building something beautiful from their shared brokenness. On their 5th anniversary, Elena found Dante at his father's grave, something he now visited regularly. "I wish you could have met her," he was saying quietly to the headstone. "She would have made you laugh, and she would have made sure I turned out better than I did, better than circumstances allowed." Elena slipped her hand into his. I think your parents would be proud of the man you've become, of what we're building together. I hope so. I really hope so. They stood there in comfortable silence, honoring the past while living fully in the present. The boy who'd watched his father die had become a man who created life instead of destroying it. The nurse who'd saved children for a living had saved one more, a broken man who'd needed to believe in redemption. Together, they proved that people could change, that love could heal, that even the darkest past could give way to brighter futures if you were brave enough to try. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better. It was real. And real, they discovered, was more than enough.